And flash your mics if you were with us 7 hours ago and joined us down that wild rabbit hole ride. So yeah, a few. Okay, a lot of folks don't know what happened, and I'm inviting up LS. And
This is LS.
Okay,
this
stop
is
it.
LS.
You guys need to stop this. Hi, LS.
Who's talking? Kyler?
Yeah, no, I can't. That's the difficult thing. It's sometimes hard to tell between LS and Cheryl, but if you listen closely, you can start to tell the difference. But
It's an artificial intelligent version of LS.
this is LS, and so here's what happened yesterday. Facebook had the biggest headline in the tech space yesterday because they launched their Clubhouse clone, which they called Live Audio Rooms, which, for those who haven't seen it, well, you're in it right now. Which one is it? Is this Facebook or is this Clubhouse? It's not easy to tell the difference. They're very similar. So I will tweet out a link so that you can see it from the Tech News Twitter account if you've not yet seen Facebook's live audio rooms, which, by the way, you're not allowed to make a live audio room. Do you know why? There's a very important...
Because you're a peon.
There's a very important reason why you, sir, are not allowed to make a Facebook live audio room. And this is where it starts to get very, very interesting. Does it not, Chris? Chris was with us when we discovered some really interesting shit that we're going to break down for y'all that the tech press is not going to figure out for quite a few days. And maybe not for a long time. And I need to find the article that they, of their own, here it is. Facebook rolls out live audio. Now, I'm going to tweet this out and listen to how I read this. There's the parts. This is really interesting because, again, nobody's really going to pick up on this unless they read between the lines. So it says, Facebook officially launches live audio rooms and podcasts in the U.S. The company tells us live audio rooms will become available to any verified public figure or creator in the U.S. who is in good standing with Facebook and is using either a profile. It's for the U.S. and for iOS only to begin with, and they're launching with a select number of dozens of groups. But notice, pay close attention to the extra word that's in this sentence. See if you can spot the extra word. Live audio rooms will become available to any verified public figure or creator in the U.S. Was there one word that jumped out in that sentence to anybody?
Hold on, I think for once I got it right.
Dave, as
Public?
usual. Yeah. So the interesting thing is, and most people would just glance right over that. They're like, oh, live audio is coming. Oh, it's iOS only at first. Okay, it's in America only at first. Okay. And skip right over that bit about the verified public figures or creators. But not me. Because I'm a little weird. And maybe you are too. And that's why we love jumping down this little rabbit hole when we see a weird word in a sentence that seems out of place. And then what we noticed is, indeed, they're only going to have verified speakers on stage. But it does say, by the way, anyone can be in the audience. Oh, say what now? Well, why make a distinction between who can be in the audience and who can be on stage? What's that all about? Hold that thought for 2 seconds because shit's about to get really strange really quick. Because Twitter has their version of Clubhouse called Twitter Spaces, which I was one of the first room creators, as many on stage know. We've been testing it over there, on the weekends for, 3 months now. And I'm also verified on Twitter. You can click on my Clubhouse bio. You will see my Twitter link. And when you see that, you'll notice I have the little blue check mark. And that, my friends, is not a coincidence that I'm a verified Twitter user and also able to be one of the first 1,000 Twitter Space creators. And many of the first Twitter Space creators were also Twitter verified accounts. And here's where it gets more interesting. Twitter, this blue check mark that everybody wants in Twitter to become a verified Twitter user is has been dormant and in hibernation for about a decade. And now it just came back. At the exact same time, they're launching, in the process of slowly rolling out, their Twitter Spaces, which is not yet available to everybody. And is that not a strange coincidence that Facebook only has verified speakers on their stage? Twitter's about to, in the process of rolling out their version of Clubhouse, and they're also in the process of doing their verified users again. And then simultaneous to those little interesting separate coincidences, there's a third one, which is Stripe came out recently and announced something called identity verification. And just for context, Stripe is the world's biggest fintech company because they figured out how to make it very easy for any website to allow payments between their users, including Clubhouse, where you can pay me through the tip jar, as some incredibly generous person did for $100 yesterday. God bless you, whoever that was. Thank you very much. And by the way, I had not noticed because I don't watch these things. There's been a bunch of people sending in 20s and whatever, and I was really blown away today when I opened my Stripe account to see that. I didn't realize people were using the tip jar, so thank you. Anyway, so the Stripe, in addition to having made it real easy for any website to enable payments with any of their users, now just launched something called identity verification. Identity authenticator, which makes it really easy for any website to authenticate the identities of all of their users. And that's interesting. That's really interesting because this is one of the biggest, fastest growing companies in the world. Why are they doing that? Hold that thought for a second. And then Carl, who's a developer, he wanted to know how is Stripe doing this identity verification, because that's not easy to do. Every website would love to do that, and Twitter put theirs in hibernation for a decade precisely because it's not easy to do. In fact, it's very difficult to do, technologically and in terms of resources. And Facebook has the resources to do it. God knows they have the resources to do it. They've got a lot of resources, capital, personal, technological. And they are doing it. They're going to roll out their version of Clubhouse for verified users. Now, hold this thought. Follow me through here. If Facebook is doing it, right, and we'll talk about why they're doing it, but the fact that they are doing it, they might then, because of we've had headlines here in the past few weeks that the head of Facebook's cybersecurity and the head of the FBI and the head of Britain's intelligence agency have all come out saying, here's our reports on who's spreading all of this misinformation on social media. It turns out to be the Kremlin, disproportionately, and then China, and then a whole bunch of other places. And they are relentless, just endless campaigns where it's taking up. There's a lot of employees at Facebook who do nothing but remove all of these misinformation campaigns. Okay, and that would all be fixed very quickly if everyone were verified users, as is the case in South Korea, where platforms are required to have verified identities of everyone who creates a social media platform with their version of their social security information. So here's where it gets really interesting. If Facebook is going to go through the whole wherewithal of verifying all of the users now, and by the way, they'll get a lot of interesting additional juicy data to add to your profile, which is kind of a win-win. But then if they're going to do that, they might as well go to their friends on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. and say, hey, guys, all of this misinformation that's causing all of this incredible political division in America, one of the biggest problems in America, if not the biggest problem in America at the moment, how about we just figured out how to solve this? We, as Facebook, are going to opt in, and we suggest that you just make it a regulation that every website identify and verify their users on their website, so we get rid of all of these bots and spammers and all of this crap. All the misinformation goes bye-bye. What do you say, Congress? How about a few $1 million to your political action committee just to grease the wheels a little bit? Let's go ahead and do this. And in doing this, it might make it more difficult now for smaller websites who don't have the resources to comply with this new regulation of verifying all these identities, because as we said, even Twitter couldn't do it. It's very hard. it's very resource intensive to verify all the identities. It's really, really hard. So then Stripe just announced a verification identity system. One line of code, put it in, 30 minutes later, boom, magical presto, they're doing it for you. And now any website will be able to comply with this potential futuristic, imagined regulation, which big players like Facebook and Apple, by the way, can verify you because they have all your credit card information. They have 500 million credit cards from all. To create an Apple account, you need to add in your credit card to have an Apple account, to use the App Store, for example. So here's where it gets interesting. So we're looking into the details of how exactly is Stripe doing this authenticity verification, and it's really interesting how they do it. And it involves photos in your face and matching your face photo to your ID's photo, and government databases that they have some sort of access to, et cetera, et cetera. And then we realized, and I have to give express credit to Renjit, who joins us regularly, who helps with my Swedish festivals. He went to Stripe's identity verification authenticator website, and they have 4 logos of 4 companies they are partnering with to launch this new verification identity system. And let me just read you Stripe identity. Let's see. Oh, stripe.com/identity is the website. And I'm going to tweet it out right now, and you can see how they do it. And then when you go to that website, I'm going to tweet out the link right now from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. But you can go yourself. It's just stripe.com/identity. And you'll notice, how they do it. It's real simple. And by the way, they've got 4 little partners they're starting out with. And maybe you know these. Shippo, PeerSpace, Discord, which is interesting because that's a social chat room, and Clubhouse. Now, if you join us every day, you'll know that I predicted about a month ago that it's very possible that in the near future, governments are going to get tired of all this shenanigans and require websites to identify all of their users. Because we cover headlines all the damn time, do we not, about how India is forcing Twitter to remove tweets they don't like. The Kremlin's forcing YouTube to remove all kinds of stuff, and Twitter, and on and on and on. Countries all over the world are constantly battling with these big tech companies to remove content they don't like. And I suspect it's a big cat and mouse game. And we go through the day-by-day, play-by-play drama of that cat and mouse game, which no doubt there's new updates today that we will get into. And then at some point, these countries are going to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you track all of the identity of all these people? And specifically, now let's start back at the beginning. Why is Facebook doing verified-only accounts on Facebook Live Audio, their version of Clubhouse? Because they are a global company with 2.5 billion users, which include very bad hombres all over the world. Who the power of this platform of social audio is far more powerful than SMS in coordinating protests and insurrections and the like. And governments know this. And governments are listening in Clubhouse, and we know this for a fact because when Clubhouse went to Thailand, it exploded in a huge way that really caught Clubhouse by pleasant surprise, because Thais love to talk, but Thais also want a way to talk about how to plan large protests in Bangkok, which they did. And guess who joined those very large 8,000 person rooms of the Thai community where I happen to live? Is the former prime minister who was exiled in a coup, one Mr. Thaksin. And that got the attention of the Thai government, as you can probably imagine. Their former exiled through military coup prime minister, Mr. Thaksin, joined the Clubhouse conversations. That sent shockwaves through the Thai government, and then the Thai ministers and intelligence community, of course, were watching all of the Thai conversations very closely. And you better believe every country has intelligence communities watching these rooms, and we've even covered stories about this. That, by the way, India, it was a headline, was it not, 4 days ago, Cal? Widely reported that the Indian intelligence agencies are all up inside a Clubhouse listening to everything everybody's saying. And you better believe that when they hear people saying things they don't like, they're telling Clubhouse, hey, who is that bad person saying those bad things about our wonderful country? And do you want to know, you want a little evidence of the fact that they are doing that? Here, I'll give you a little evidence that they're doing that. So, glad that you asked. Because Cal and I were just DMing, I don't know, 2-3 days ago, Cal, about...
this weekend. Yeah.
Yes, over the weekend. Yeah, right. About this headline that just came out from AP News, Associated Press, which I will retweet again right now. U.S. resident sought by China for comments that he made online. Oh, wait, say what now? What happened? Yeah, you heard that right. And let me read it to you in black and white. So here it is. I just tweeted it from Tech News Around the World, TNATW. United Arab Emirates, a permanent resident of the United States wanted by China, was freed by Dubai on Thursday. Beijing had sought Wang Jingyu over his online comments about the deadly confrontation between Chinese and Indian forces in the Himalayas last year. Say what now? Yeah, you heard that right. This guy, Wang, made online comments about the battle that the Chinese and Indian forces had in the Himalayas on that border dispute. And he made some online comments. Next thing you know, he lands in Dubai and he's arrested by unidentified or plainclothes officers. Arrest him as he exits the plane and holds him in detention for 2 weeks. And then the Associated Press says, which you can read yourself from the Twitter account that I just sent out. It says Wang's case comes as the United Arab Emirates, long a U.S. defense partner in the Middle East, has drawn closer to China in recent years in trade and in efforts to combat the coronavirus pandemic to get vaccines from China. That already has sparked concerns among American officials amid what experts refer to as a looming, growing relations between the UAE and China. Which, by the way, China just bought about $2 billion worth of oil from the UAE, as Faraz, I believe, shared that headline. Now, the AP is claiming that within an hour of them calling the UAE to ask, why have you arrested this individual, he was released. So the police Wang came to authorities, which you can read in that article that they just sent out as well. So, but the interesting that, and by the way, this gentleman Wang, when he was in the UAE detention center for 2 weeks, had a special visitor. Can you guess who that visitor might be? Well, if you guessed the ambassador, China's ambassador to the UAE, you guessed correctly. Well done, everybody. Very clever of you. So, yes, these countries care very much what people are saying about them on the interwebs. And Clubhouse specifically, because Clubhouse is far more useful at coordinating groups of, individuals who states, can be concerned about. So,
Tyler, just a question for us.
Let me just tie the knot on that thought. My point. This goes back to now you understand why Facebook is only allowing verified accounts, because they are active all throughout the world, where you have Boko Haram and ISIS and Hezbollah and all of these actors. And if it was open to the public, oh boy, are you opening a powder keg to explode in your face? And you better believe that the countries in those areas are not about to let that shit happen. So Facebook would then need to be blocked and banned in the countries where those potential bad actors would be bad acting. And Facebook understands this, so hence they're only doing verified. Hence Twitter's re-implementing their verified system. Hence Clubhouse just partnered with Stripe for their verified identities. And that's what we figured out yesterday. Go ahead.
Just a question for us here. Do we think that the backdrop of all this will in any way stifle our search for the truth on here, to put both sides of the argument across? I.e., we'll talk about, the facts around China, like both for and against. I don't know. It was just a question, Tyler.
Yeah, China is not so eager to participate in a kind of open free speech debate about the way they do things.
But Dave, I'd frame it slightly differently from the way it's not two sides. This is how the puzzle's coming together. So let's kind of hang in there, because I think what I'm seeing here is just pieces of a puzzle coming together, and then if there's a big picture thesis that's emerging, that's going to have two sides of a coin of that thesis, right? But at the moment, it isn't a two-sided thing. It's not China good, US bad. It's just a general or government good, people good, people good, government bad. It's not as linear as that. It's kind of very interesting. It's the way I'm seeing it, Tyler pulling it together. And yesterday was a key piece of that puzzle coming together around identity and us understanding that, specifically around Stripe, because that we all relate to that, right, as well. Here in this community, we relate to that quite really. But I think that's what it is, Dave. Does that make sense? I don't think it's
I suppose just to cut through to it, like, will we stop talking about Uyghur Muslims on this platform because we hear these backdrop of these stories? I mean, that's just the cut through, like, not that I think we should, but I don't know. I just don't like the rumblings of like control going out over the airways. I wouldn't want it to stifle our free speech on here. That's my point that I'm trying to land.
Well, yeah, as Chris cleverly joked yesterday, just for the record, I love China. And by the way, I love the King of Thailand. I got to tell you, that is one handsome dude, and so incredibly smart. This guy, I got to tell you. So yeah, it's going to get very interesting in this verified web world. And by the way, a very, very similar issue also has happened in the past 48 hours, where we had our friend Jane, who joins us here regularly from Hong Kong. You know who I'm talking about, Cal, Cheryl?
Yeah.
Jane Wong is renowned, as she just did again today, for breaking Twitter news. In fact,
yes, of course, I know Jane.
She breaks so much Twitter news that Twitter today tweeted their new feature, and they said, sorry, Jane, we're leaking it before you have a chance to leak our news for us. You can't leak it if we leak it first. That's how often Jane is breaking Twitter's own news, that they realize she's more effective than their own PR team. But she's not doing just Twitter. She's doing most of the top websites around the world. She's truly brilliant. Anyway, she joins us regularly in the other time zone, but she broke a really wild revelation in the past 48 hours, which I need to find again to update everybody. This is also equally very, very interesting development and plays right into this whole topic of conversation, which is that let me get her tweet and I'll tweet it out again. There was a gentleman who in Hong Kong who was the youngest elected politician, and I got to tweet out Twitter's tweet of leaking their own new product, and then they named Jane in their own product leak because they managed to leak it before Jane could get a hold of it, which is quite hilarious. So I'm just retweeting that now. You can see that for yourself. It was just 9 hours ago.
And they were proud of themselves.
Yeah,
they did it for once.
They managed to beat
like
Jane.
Once out of 50.
Yes. So, but back to Jane's tweet. I just tweeted out Twitter's tweet naming Jane and being proud of the fact that they beat Jane to leaking their own update before Jane could leak it. And but a couple days ago, about 48 hours ago, Jane was in a tweet thread with one of Hong Kong's Democratic activist politicians who had a website powered by Wix, W-I-X, Wix, out of Israel, and Hong Kong didn't like what this individual had written, and he went to Yale, studied law. He knows the rules as a politician, youngest elected member of the Hong Kong legislature at the age of 23. And anyway, so Wix took down the website at the request of Hong Kong. And then he wrote Wix a little email saying, hey, Wix, WTF, WIX. And they reviewed it and they said, very sorry. And they did an apology publicly and reinstated his site because, in fact, his site had done nothing wrong and nothing illegal of any kind, blah, blah, blah. So they reinstate it. And then Jane, knowing Hong Kong, says, you know what is likely to happen in the next 24 hours or so is that Hong Kong, now that Wix has reinstated the site, Hong Kong will ban it by calling the telephone companies, which are located in Hong Kong, and forcing them to block it through an ISP block, so that when you try and type in the web address for that site, it just won't go because the pipes of the internet are blocked to that website, which is a very clever way to block a website when the website itself won't remove that page as they previously did and then put it back. And then sure enough, about 8 hours later, they did do that. And that's very concerning because that's limiting a kind of freedom of press, freedom of speech that and is essentially the origins of China's Great Firewall of China and how they removed content that they found offensive. And now that is that process. We're now seeing the baby steps of a slippery slope in Hong Kong, which is concerning because it's always wondered now that China has effectively removed the ability for the Hong Kongers to protest. In fact, they can't even hold up a single white sheet of empty white paper because they were doing that as a form of protest to symbolize that they've been silenced. And now even that is against the law and they will be jailed for holding up a white sheet of paper that has nothing on it is now an illegal form of protest. They're not even saying anything. And so now that they've silenced people who aren't even saying anything bad, it's a white sheet of paper, right? They've done it on the ground physically, but now they need to do it in the cloud digitally because they kind of go hand in hand. What's the point of silencing them on the ground if you're not silencing them in the cloud digitally? But that's where you get a real interesting predicament, because to do that, you're going to have to include Hong Kong as part of the mainland China's Great Firewall of China. And you're going to have to remove Twitter and Clubhouse and Facebook and the whole Western internet that Hong Kong is on and make them part of the Chinese internet that they completely control. And so now we just saw the little embryonic baby steps on the slippery slope to embracing, folding in Hong Kong into China's Great Wall, which we assumed was going to happen at some point, but we weren't exactly sure how it would play out. And now we're starting to see the possible early indications of how this is going to play out. And no tech journalist has covered this yet. So will be interesting to see, a month from now when the tech journalists figure out what's going on. But as usual, Jane is ahead of the case. And I think we're a little ahead of the case on this, why it's so important to identify the users of social audio apps, because they're incredibly powerful, as Facebook no doubt knows, because they deal with these governments, and Clubhouse is starting to deal with these governments. And my God, not a day goes by that we don't read a headline of Twitter or WhatsApp or Facebook battling Twitter just got shut down in Nigeria. They're they're on the doorstep of getting their ass kicked out of India. And yeah, it's very interesting how these guys in Russia is making very strong, interesting threats to both Twitter and YouTube. And they have a really interesting approach. They give you a warning before they kick you out by slowing down your internet service, which really tells you how much control they have over the internet pipes. Of course, they could block you, just as Hong Kong just blocked that Wix website, but they slowed down your website and make it painful to use, which is an interesting baby step in itself towards kind of a soft blocking. So it's all very interesting. No doubt we will have other headlines today in the next hour or two. Sit back, relax, and we're going to jump into what's going on all around the tech sphere, as we always do. Before we do, and I go into my long stack of tweets that people are tweeting at me, anyone on stage burning with something hot they want to share?
I was just gonna kind of add a little bit, like on Facebook in Ethiopia has been really in big trouble the last few days because of the election that happened yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
because there has been a lot of falsehoods, including the prime minister, like a dog false tape, like audio that's showing the prime minister saying he would rather die than leave office if he loses, or another one that's really making even things worse between Ethiopia and Egypt, saying that Ethiopia is preparing to have a nuclear war with Egypt, and these are all verified to be fake accounts. So yeah, Facebook has been in big trouble in Ethiopia for the last few days. Yeah, that's all I just wanted to add.
So it gets a particularly friction filled in the moments of elections, and I don't envy Facebook or Twitter or any of these folks when it comes to elections, because that's when the platform plays a kind of an even more critical role, which they understand. And it gets really crazy because people start using hashtags, as they did in India with Resign Modi, or in the Israel Palestine scenario where they were saying using a hashtag of Free Palestine, and they're doing the best they can. But just for those who don't know, when people start using hashtags, and then what happens is some people start saying that this hashtag is offensive, right? You can tell Facebook when you find something offensive, just as you can in Clubhouse or any social app. And so people use the hashtag becomes popular. Some people say, that hashtag's offensive, and they start telling Facebook this wildly offensive thing is happening. And if 10,000 people say this is offensive, that triggers an algorithm that says, okay, let's remove all of any posts with those hashtags and put them into quarantine to be reviewed by a human moderator. Okay, and now everybody who used the hashtag Free Palestine or Resign Modi or any other offensive hashtag all of a sudden feels that they've been silenced, because now their content, poof, is gone from the internet. Oh boy, Facebook hates Palestine, they start saying. Or they hate they obviously love Modi because they removed all of our tweets that say Resign Modi, and they assume, Facebook is against us, they're silencing us. And in the meantime, they're just escalating it to a human review, common sense, on Facebook side. And they review it and they realize, this is a very sticky political situation, this one. This is not like ban Burger King, right? Or, fuck Starbucks or anything like that. This is like a serious shit. Let's get the lawyers involved and let's get the PR pros involved. And so now we got to schedule a meeting with the lawyers and the PR team, and that's going to take 24 hours. Get that whole motley crew together, and then they get together and they debate for let's go, we got to call Frank on this one, and Sarah and Jesse, and let's have a second meeting about this. Next thing you know, 2-3 days have gone by. Mark Zuckerberg gets called in, and Mark's like, put it back, put all those, you removed all that content, and now we've got a new problem, which is all the newspapers in India are now saying that we're silencing people. So we've made a new problem by the fact that it took us 2 days to even deal with this. So put it all back. Hurry, put it back, and apologize to everybody that we even removed it, which they do. Okay, fine. But the damages are already sort of done, because they don't know why their content got removed anyways, but now they see this apology and the content's been reinstated, but there's still now a lot of understandable skepticism on part of the people who had their content temporarily removed. And it's a really tricky, and this is happening every day all around the world, and it's happening in Ethiopia now, and especially during these elections, because really weird shit can happen during elections, because we know states, bad actors take advantage of these platforms during these times, and they're, the social media sites are doing the absolute best they can to minimize the effects of bot armies and all of this. And this gets right back to the identity verification. If everyone was identified, you wouldn't have these a lot of rogue, bad, inauthentic misinformation campaigns and the whatnot. You would still have people saying what they want to say, and there would still be idiots on the internet. God knows you can't fix that. So you're going to have, a lot of help, but it'll be much more genuine, authentic, healthy types of debates that our friend Dave was, alluding to.
I don't know if I agree with that,
Go
Tyler.
ahead.
Like in the slightest, actually.
Go ahead.
So, like, like most people don't realize that like Cambridge Analytica actually cut a lot of its teeth in Africa.
Mhm.
Like they were really active in the Kenyan elections. I think they were also really active in Nigeria. A lot of the early deepfake stuff was done during that. I'm kind of eyeing some of the stuff going on in Ethiopia as well. There's what you're going to see, and where this, I think you're a little off base, to put it bluntly, on the impact of the verification scheme on all of this. I mean, the truth of the matter is that a lot of these companies just came up through the United States' view of freedom of speech being extremely expansionistic. Like it's very unique in the sense of the rest of the world's view of freedom of speech and expression. But there's a reason the Canadian Constitution is the most copied in the world, and the United States it isn't. Like blasphemy laws are generally where most of the restrictions on freedom of speech and expression kind of derive from. They're synonymous throughout the rest of the world. Like the U.S. is very much an outlier in that case. So this problem is very much an individual national one. And what you have in the case of, in my opinion, where things are going, you're going to have certain country-based electoral systems that are going to have certain, shall we say, special rights for things that can be said. Opposition parties will sometimes have their own kind of place in this system. And it'll still be just a messy free-for-all. Like Facebook has no friends. Twitter has no friends. They've never... The United States has always been a little reticent about kind of forcing its expansionistic view of freedom of speech around the world. We like to say free speech, never really acknowledging that it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Like I wrote my legal thesis in around comparative constitutional law between the U.S. and the U.K. just to highlight how vastly different these two similar countries are in regards to freedom of expression. This is always going to be a problem. There was never a universe where this wasn't going to shake out in a different way.
I'll do you one better, because there's more. Because when India or the Kremlin or whoever tells these social sites to take down this content, let's use India because it's more of a democracy with a bit more freedom of speech. Then and Twitter complies at the end of the day because they don't want to be kicked out of India, because that's a lot of roadies, folks. That's a lot of cash going on there in India, and they don't want to miss out on all of that big piles of cash that they can get their hands on in India. So they comply and they remove offensive content in India, even though it might not, it's debatable whether or not it violates their rules. And then something miraculous happens back home in America. Is the employees at these companies, Americans, are kind of a unique bunch of folks, and they think, oh, hell no. You took down what? Those people deserve freedom of speech, exactly as John's saying. And they have a hard time understanding that the rest of the world has a different interpretation of what freedom of speech means, and they assume the world deserves to have America's freedom of speech. And so when Facebook takes down content or Twitter takes down content to comply with India, and the Facebook employees don't agree with that decision, they start writing big letters to the senior executive staff saying, don't do that or we're going to leave. And here's 5,000 employees have all signed this letter saying, don't remove stuff next time India tells you to, or we are all quitting. And that's it gets very interesting indeed. And there's even more to the story than that, because simultaneous to this, there's an additional threat, which is especially in the case of Twitter at the moment, where Twitter came up with a clever solution. Rather than remove some content, they just start flagging it, saying this content is not what it claims to be. And they happen to use that flag on India's government's spokesperson's Twitter account. And India didn't like that Twitter was flagging their own official Twitter account content as being, needing your extra attention before you view it. So they sent down 6 or 7 gentlemen in uniforms down to Twitter's office to have a little chat. And they were not at the office that day due to COVID. And that simultaneous at that moment that live stream was streaming, that we were tweeting and watching in this room live as it was happening, their competitor was being funded $30 million, called Koo, K-O-O, who is incredibly friendly to the government, is overtly stated. Their premise is that they're incredibly compliant with the government. All of the government's supporting celebrities all jumped on the site, and this is Twitter's main competitor. And then when Twitter gets kicked out of Nigeria 2 weeks later, guess who shows up saying, hey, here you're having problems with that little blue birdie. It's us, it's Coup. And we're cool. We're cool with you. So jump on the Coup train, baby, and we'll do whatever you want. You got some bad people saying some bad things that are hurting your feelings? We'll take that shit down lickety split, baby. No problem. So now you've got Twitter in a real bind between the country, their own employees, and a new competitor who's willing to do whatever the country wants. So it's
but I don't have any sympathy for Twitter, Tyler, because
okay.
These problems are entirely of their own making, and Facebook's as well.
Mm-hmm.
They were cowardly,
mm-hmm.
to put it bluntly.
So
they were cowardly. They sat on the fence, and this is what happens. Like they lived in a bizarro world where they were immune from having to kind of insulate or protect themselves, and they never understood if they were a publisher or a platform. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too, and they have no friends anymore. So why? Like none of this is new. Like the writing was on the wall of this like 5 years ago. The issue is all about the piping and how it's going to happen and what the results are going to be. But they can't get anyone in DC to protect their interests abroad. I mean, I'm baffled by this. Like none of this.
What are you baffled by?
I don't think these are here. Like, believe me, I'm not a fan of the platforms either. But in the scope of the hegemon battle, right, the dollar hegemon, the Belt and Road Initiative, and DeFi, you can kind of believe that the U.S. is gonna back whoever's gonna run the U.S. style operating system, for lack of a better word.
I very rarely am blunt about this, but you would just be wrong about that. Like that's not the case, because the U.S. doesn't
which
have
part
a
are you
unified
saying is
position
wrong?
on these things.
Sorry,
don't.
I'm a little confused by the
well,
which part are you saying is wrong?
Let's figure out.
Clarity.
John, you as Clubhouse, the new CEO of Clubhouse, congratulations, by the way, and you in India, and the Indian Intelligence Service is now widely reported to be in Clubhouse, and no doubt they're hearing things they don't like, and they're now emailing you 1,000 times a day saying, we need the identities of these people or you need to leave India, your new biggest market. What do you do?
There's nothing proprietary about my platform. I basically have to understand that I'm at the complete mercy of this. If I have common sense, I want to kind of reach out to probably NSC and maybe DNI, play nice with NSA, make sure that I make it very clear that we are a new version of social media to the United States, that we're going to be very friendly to the United States government and their interests. But at the same time, since Clubhouse is very small and I can still shape my corporate culture, I make it very clear that my employees, if they don't like the position that we're going to be taking, have more than enough freedom to walk away. They're not going to be, taking, aggressive positions on, letter writing campaigns, anything like that. It's going to be a very apolitical statement, and that they're going to abide by select governments,
You're cutting
rules
out,
in
or
the
am
actual
I?
governments. Like you have to lay it out early. They have a great potential to shape this now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's still in the works. And then again, make sure that if Clubhouse is going to be the thing, and it's going to be really hard because you've got to convince people that you're going to be able to beat out the Facebooks and all these other people that have way more data and way more of a, just sheer cash moat than you do. You've got to convince the officials who don't understand this already and have never been ahead of anything in their entire lives, right? Politicians are functionally reactionary agents, that they deserve some kind of political protection, preferably through state or the national security apparatus. And at that point, you appeal to the U.S. to go to bat for you abroad within some of these jurisdictions so that you aren't bullied out like this. It's the only option that you have.
Well, I'm still confused, John, as to what you're baffled about. Because
Oh,
that makes sense. That's a great.
No, I'm fundamentally baffled about the concept that this wasn't coming for these, called them Web 1.0, 2.0 social media
for
companies.
the companies. Oh, well,
Yes.
that's the stupidity of humans running companies. They don't see it coming. Right? You know how that is. That's like we didn't see a lot of shit coming at Best Buy. Like tons of shit coming at you, right? Trains coming at you. This is the beauty of seeing it from outside, because they never see it coming.
But we can
It's
play.
like the idea
John's
of not
bringing.
the politicization conquest of Hong Kong, that was always written on the wall.
Right.
But I have a different view, and I'll wait when you guys are done, because I have a different observation of this.
But
Especially with
I like what John's saying here, which is Clubhouse does have a unique opportunity, kind of watching what's happening with Twitter and Facebook in their internationalization as Clubhouse.
And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. That's kind of what I was getting at. Is whoever's going to play ball with the dollar hegemon stack is going to be, the winner in this 3-part game, right? There's the DeFi, because I really believe there's going to be the DeFi movement that's also going to decentralize communications and finance, right? So you're mixing those two.
You're
jumping. Need
Oh,
identification.
Chris, you're jumping to the end of the book, which I don't know that John's aware of how the chapter ends. So let's hold that thought. But in the meantime, in the case of Clubhouse in India, I like what you're saying, which is you got to make it real clear to your company from before you start internationalizing that, look, we're going to go into these countries. They're going to tell us to do things that are against our quote unquote traditional American values. And we're going to generally comply, even though it might conflict with our American values because it's their country. We're going to be nice hosts or gracious guests in their country. And if you have a problem with that, you might want to start looking for another, place now. And I think that is an interesting move. To prevent kind of the mutinies that the other social networks are dealing with at the moment. And then furthermore, to your point, you do want to try and get America to be your bodyguard. So to make your case for you in trying to have a debate with India, because you as a little tech company have not a snowball's chance in hell, which I agree, that's also a really smart strategy. And I guess the case where that will sort of manifest itself is when India starts saying, we want the names of these people who said these things, and then you have reasons to believe that those people will be disappeared. In Hong Kong, for example, where Clubhouse is today, and as we saw with this American resident who was detained for 2 weeks in UAE, if China says to Clubhouse, there's a Hong Konger, which by the way is our territory, who is saying things bad, and if you turn those names over, that person goes bye-bye. Do you turn those names over or not, John?
So this is the part that's going to be very, I'll call it uncomfortable for Clubhouse and any Silicon Valley-based company.
Sure.
You just can't do business in China. Full stop.
Hong Kong?
Like you just draw a giant, it's China. Draw a giant X over it, your social media company.
Yeah.
They're never going to be fair.
China made that decision for Clubhouse already.
China, Russia. The real battles are going to be over Indonesia. The real battles are going to be in Nigeria.
I'll give you a better
Ethiopia.
one. I'll give you a better one. Thailand, where I am, 100 million people. Somebody said something bad about the king. They will be gone forever. And Thailand says, hey, we're a nice country. We're a big democracy. We're your most important trading partner in the Southeast Asia. We need the information about this individual.
I honestly, like that is such a interesting cultural dynamic in Thailand. I actually don't mind that so much. I think Vietnam would be a harder choice, right? Authoritarian, but still very. And this is the real hard part about the concept that I'm crafting, and that's it's almost impossible to stay on the right side of U.S. foreign policy at all times. Like I actually think it's impossible for countries to always align themselves with U.S. interests because like it shifts constantly. It's trying to nail Jello to the wall at times. But you still have to try and get it mostly right. It's like herding cats. You can't always get them all, but you can sort of steer them in a certain direction. That's sort of what you have to aim for, knowing that you're going to miss.
So maybe,
and just try and get the general macro.
If I understand correctly, maybe what you're proposing is the best strategy is to work as a sort of arm of the U.S. government, so that you maintain them as an advisor in all of these issues to play, as long as you're working in coordination and in step with the U.S., then they'll continue to play your kind of supportive role when you get into these difficult situations with Thailand, for example.
Worked for Bechtel.
That might be the right way to do it. It's such a complex. I don't envy any of these companies, And you're right. If you start pissing off the U.S., then of course then you're left all on your own. And Jack Dorsey does have a backup plan, which Chris was mentioning or alluding to, which is he's going to take the whole thing decentralized and then tell all these countries to go fuck themselves, which is a very interesting
I don't think
counter
that'll
move.
work either for other reasons.
Why
But
not?
I don't want to monopolize stage too much.
No, but,
No,
feel
John.
free.
John, the other
Please
thing,
do.
John, the other thing that you brought up there is kind of just I've not thought about the entire like construction industry, the the global power and construction industry. I mean, if I was just your like scenario of I'd hire people from there, right? From the to understand what they did, Bechtel and all these other guys. Like, so it's a whole different set of competence you're going to need inside these companies. A social media company, you'd never think about hiring, the guys that who figured out stuff at Bechtel. That's another angle there. It's really interesting.
I've
I want to
never
chime in here
been.
quickly.
It
So my dad
baffles
is a
me
civil.
to an. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So my dad is a civil engineer in Tanzania for like over 30, 40 years, and he's always explained to me the evolution for him working with Western contractors, architects, the UK, Europe, the US, and guess what? Around 2005, he suddenly became very friendly with. He loved the Chinese contractors, and they just worked harder. Is the main thing he used to say. They don't hang out the yacht club and have all these big families to support in boarding school and go back to home every summer. They were at site. The Chinese contractors were at site 24/7, right? Just one aspect. But the other thing we should bring up here is the kickbacks, right? I mean, obviously there's the US has a strong anti-bribery policy abroad, and I've also heard companies like Cisco having a lot of hard time back in the mid 2000s. Of course, with the rise of Huawei and others, and kickbacks to government, and so it's started becoming very, very important. So I think that aspect, some of these tech companies, obviously they won't be doing that, but others are, like in Chinese, I'm sure they are doing that. And so I think that's another angle to add here, that we shouldn't be naive that there's other forces like kickbacks at play, particularly in emerging markets like Nigeria, in the rest of Africa as well.
That's a great.
Yeah, the chief difference has always been that the Chinese don't really have the equivalent of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in any meaningful way, but the U.S., unlike China, can provide security guarantees, which China, like as a matter of their foreign policy, just actively refused to do. So, I mean, that's sort of the differentiator, like at a very high level. But, I mean, I think it requires a fundamental shift in the entire Silicon Valley mindset, fundamentally. I think they're just I think they have come up during an age that no longer exists. I don't think they're as nimble and adaptable and mentally flexible as they want to profess themselves to be, and they have no idea what is coming for them. Like it baffles me constantly at how terrible some of their just forward-looking concepts about where I think the world is going versus where I think they think it's going. It really actually annoys me. It's probably actually
Yeah,
in my voice as I'm talking about this topic because it's the most
it's like
frustrating thing.
these tech companies actually need to wise up, and like it reminds me of like 4 or 5 years ago when 500 startup asked me where should they set up their Africa office, the timeless question, is it Cape Town, is it Nairobi, is it Lagos, is it Accra, right? And then only a few weeks ago Twitter chose Accra as a tech headquarters in Africa. Like, I actually think these companies need to really think about opening 2 or 3 offices, not just one, because by picking one country, you're already taking some side on some issue, right? They need to be much more engaged on the ground. And yes, before I've heard of this attitude of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs being like, yeah, we're gonna build this startup for Africa, but we're gonna stay here in Silicon Valley, right, and run it from here, and we'll fly into Nairobi or Lagos as we need to. That may have worked 5, 10 years ago, but not going to work today, baby. You need to actually go in there now and be much more cognizant of what you're doing. Meet with the government if possible. And like it happens even within Africa. I mean, I'm Tanzanian, and sometimes I hear Nigerian founders coming to me and saying, "Oh, we'll just pop by and say hi for one day in Dar es Salaam." Like, no, if you're serious about building a healthcare startup in the digital space or a fintech startup in the in Tanzania, you need to go and see the government, show face, hire a Tanzanian GM. This is what Uber did very well, actually. I should mention. Uber were very, very good at hiring local GMs in every city they opened up in Africa, right? Kampala to Nairobi to Lagos to Cape Town. So I think that, I see a change that needs to happen with these tech companies. They need to be much more wise up as to being on the ground and having local representatives, whether they like it or not.
Interesting
And
point.
I think they also need to understand the intricacies of each African country, right? Multi-ethnic groups in one single country exist, and they can't just use a simple algorithm that amplifies something. You can't just amplify hate speech or something else just sitting on a blanket of some law in the US. So yeah, in order to be
Yeah,
successful, they need to understand, in Ethiopia, one of the problems they are having with Facebook and others is that it's not only the fake account, even the real account, when you have, misinformation or hate speech and things like that, they kind of have this lousy kind of algorithm that just feeds you and amplify things that are making situations worse. So they really do need to understand the nuances of every single country, how culture works, how tribes work, how all these things fit into together in order to operate in each
And,
Last
and
point.
are
area.
in love with their own brands. Like that's the other thing that
Yeah.
never made sense to me in Africa or even Latin America with Facebook and Twitter and a lot of these companies. Why can't you just white label them? Like create your own localized version. I understand that your brand has huge IP value in the States and you want it to be this global concept. It's a part of who you are, but maybe just create a localized version of the product and spin it out there. It worked for Walmart. They couldn't enter the Brazilian market, so they just bought a local retailer and then expanded it under the name, right? Just it's not going to be maybe as easy or maybe even as profitable. And Legasp, you might actually have to pick a side occasionally in some really nasty parts of the world if you want to do business there. But that's kind of the cost of doing business at times.
And
Or
I
hold on,
oh,
Ellis. Or now we might have some understanding as to why these big tech companies also have these incredibly ambitious internet provider initiatives like the loon balloons and the flying airplanes and the satellite systems. Amazon and SpaceX both launching satellites to cover global Wi-Fi. Facebook, Google both have very big plans for these big balloon Wi-Fi things that they're testing, because when you get into a difficult conversation with a country and you're providing their Wi-Fi and their cable, their international cable that provides their internet, you might have a bit of a little bit more leverage in that conversation if you're providing the internet to that country, or the currency or the digital currencies that their citizens are using, or the platforms. By the way, now that social commerce is exploding and Instagram and TikTok and all of the social apps are onboarding small businesses into their apps, so that the little cake shop is no longer a cake shop. It's somebody in their kitchen who's putting their business on Instagram and selling cakes through Instagram. They no longer need the storefront because everything's going towards social e-commerce. And when Instagram's got all of your small businesses in your country on their apps, it's a little bit harder to tell Instagram what to do, to dictate the terms. Instagram could, in fact, flip the script on you and tell you, actually, here's how it's going to go, Indonesia. We've got all of your businesses now running on our app. So here's what's really going to happen. So the power dynamic is going to quickly shift once these tech companies start providing the internet, have the businesses, especially once they start taking over your medical system and your education system.
I think again that they're going to have to partner with the local telcos, especially in Africa. They're too powerful down there. The government's not going to want to give that up. That's the equivalent of and I hate using, well, occasionally I get amused by using the Marxist terms, but it's sort of the new intellectual commanding heights, right? But again, I want to hear what LS has to say. I know he's been trying to get
Go
in
ahead,
here for a
LS.
while. I'd love to hear his thoughts.
no, it's just I agree actually with John on the other point. I think there's going to be three major points. One is that he alluded to is, and I'm not defending big tech at all. So let's see, because I've been fighting, building my own shit. But you're talking about shareholders, and you're right. I think someone alluded to change the metrics of what is going on for finance and what's the value of a CEO being removed or founder or whatever once you grow a company. Because if you say you just get kicked out of India or these markets, you can have a shareholder with vote if you're a public company, especially at the level of Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And I'm not defending them at all. It's just like you said, you got to have that foresight. The other thing, though, I do agree is that I think there's DeFi and decentralization. And we're looking at, I'm already trademarking AI for the small guy. We'll do that. I mean, I just believe in a decentralization platform anyway. I don't care. You do the pipes like internet provider, and you make it available for everyone. And you kind of go to the Cisco model or to Best Buy. You just you just decentralize this versus hubbing it from Silicon Valley and saying, this is the way the world needs to work. Ethiopia, you need to think this way. Africa, you think this way. Brazil, you'll think this way. That kind of exportation, and like you said, John, earlier, of the dollar hegemony since '54, of the reserve currency, that doesn't work anymore. That's an old model that's gone, where you're going to export your ideology and your technology and your way of thinking to other countries. You're just going to have to meet them halfway and accept it, because they will come up. But the other thing I do want to add, and I'll try to lower my voice because I'm outside walking, the one thing that hasn't been talked about, though, is talent. And two, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was, who was that? Maybe Zimbabwe that was speaking earlier. He might be on the phone or something. But is finding the right talent locally as well to grow organically. And I think maybe Meseret may have said something about how the algorithm doesn't work there locally, because you've got to have an engineer, or at least enough engineers, to be able to get to have that homegrown organic growth. My son's half Ethiopian, so I know it well. I mean, it's Ethiopian African American because I'm African American. But, he's been there several years. I've been there. So when you understand that, he will be able to go there in about 5 years after college and so forth and do really well, because he was born here and lived here in the West. But he's been there several years. Every other year he goes on vacation for about a month. But that's different. That's going to be about 5 or 10 years down the line, where I think a lot of these countries will emerge and be able to organically grow their own tech base. And I'm talking about knowledge base specifically, not so much training an engineer or tech. I mean, they need to know how to solve these problems, whether it be whatever the algorithms are, machine learning, AI, AGI, quantum, whatever it needs to be. That's what I guess I'm saying.
Well, one really interesting thought, because there's Ozzy is DMing Allahu. My God, there's way too many DMs. Please stop DMing me, and please raise your hand and jump on stage, or tweet in response to the tweets. By the way, when you DM me, no one in the room can hear your DMs, by the way. So
can I push back a little bit on what John said about the telcos?
Sure.
Just for 1 second?
Yeah, in 1 second, I'll let you do that. Somebody in the audience is DMing saying that about playing by the U.S. rules according to U.S. worldview when we're talking about basic human rights. It's bigotry of low expectations. Chinese and Vietnamese and Indians and Russians and so on are humans, and human rights is not an American thing, kind of alluding to it's an interesting point that but I guess this person would not be hired at John's company for. So when John's in the hiring process of like, let's we're having coffee. Welcome, you've just applied for the job. How do you feel? Here, let's talk about this scenario. Somebody on our platform says something negative about the monarchy in a particular Southeast Asian country, where they will disappear for doing so, and they're asking us to essentially identify that person so they can make that person disappear. How do you feel about that? Nice to meet you, by the way. Do you need validation for your parking? And then, depending on how they respond, you would actually need to start vetting people at the interview process. Else you're going to get yourself in a very sticky situation indeed, because as these big tech companies are now, they have lots of team members who feel as this individual does, which is, this kind of American millennial type value that is incompatible with doing business in much of the world. Yeah. Difficult thing. Go ahead, Chris.
So, John, on the telco part, I would typically agree with you. Like, even as late as a couple years ago, I'd totally agree with you that, telco and 4G, 5G are really the key. But, with things like Starlink and what do you do to circumvent? What do you do to prevent your citizenry from accessing it? I mean, in Russia, they're using legislation and fear to keep you from doing it. I'm sure there are actual technologies that could jam that band, but what are they going to do short of doing that, right? And so that's where I would push back a little bit. But typically, I would agree. You do have to work with the last mile partners in a traditional rollout. But, I think things are changing so fast that, they are decentralizing. Now you're seeing decentralized internet.
Okay.
I think 60% of Rwanda is still in the agricultural space, one way or another. We do some agricultural productivity improvements in the country, and as a result, one of the things you have to really carefully balance is the system that you're actually putting into place going to be a threat to the actual government, because you might actually be, through productivity improvements, putting more people out of work, and that's a social destabilization asset, in which case the government's just going to show up and wreck your stuff. And I think the threat of kinetics is not something that people think about very often, but it's all too real. And I think just saying the technology is there and it will work is not a good way of looking at this. There's a lot more that goes into it than just the tech. And I think, and I don't mean to say that you're saying that. I don't think you are in any way. But I think that there are very, very real ways to move around things. Like, once a tech exists, there's going to be ways to circumvent it. Like, it will. Like, whether you get that from the U.S., from China, it seems like a great arms sale activity that could go out. I mean, it seems like an opportunity from my case, which is to, find technology to jam the technology. Why not?
Yes, the spy versus spy, and where the Ukrainian hackers usually win in the end by enabling. So, by the way, the biggest news headline in all of tech at the moment, as by the number of the amount of coverage and the amount of tweets, is a New York Times article. And boy, what an interesting coincidence. This headline fits right in. Current and former Google executives say that the company suffers from both its size and Sundar Pichai's leadership, marked by delayed decisions and raging culture fights. Oh, well, gee, I wonder why they're having raging culture fights at these big tech companies. Anyone have any ideas what they might be arguing about? That's the headline, the biggest headline in the tech sphere today, as written by the New York Times. I'm tweeting that out right now so you can read it for yourself, but you just listened to a potentially even better conversation right here for the past hour in tech news around the world about precisely what's really going on inside of these tech companies, in a way that I doubt the New York Times is privy to. But give it a read. Let us know what it says. Despite record profits, a number of Google employees are worried that the company is suffering from both its size and leadership from Sundar Pichai. And other biggest headlines at the moment. And this one explains something that was intimate to tech news around the world. We covered a headline about 3 days ago that Facebook had softly announced that they were now testing for the very first time ads inside of Oculus, inside of the VR, inside of virtual reality. It was now revealed the very first ads were going to be part of a video game called Bastion, created by friends of mine in Stockholm, a company called Resolution Games, who I contacted in real time. You'll remember when the headline broke, I pinged my friend Daniel, who works at Resolution Games, and says, hey, jump on in here. We're talking about the fact that you are the very first creator of ads inside of virtual reality. What an interesting historic moment. Just like the first ads on blogs was done by my friend Jason, who invited me to Clubhouse. Or, let's talk about these ads in virtual reality, because now we're going to have subsidized ad paid. Maybe this is going to make free games. Now they're going to be ad paid games. You don't have to buy, and he politely declined, curiously. And now we know why, because the second biggest headline in the tech sphere at the moment is Resolution Games pulls Bastion out of the Facebook ad test. And now we know why Daniel couldn't join us to talk about the ads in VR. Because the headline now says the studio may still consider testing ads in its free fishing game called Bait, a different title. Resolution Games won't be moving forward with the Facebook advertising test for its paid VR game Bastion, as Facebook announced last week. And I tweeted that article out so you can read it for yourself. Resolution's game CEO and an old friend of mine, Tommy Palm, in fact, the husband of my co-host of my events, released the following prepared statement regarding the ad test. Our mission at Resolution Games has always been to work to help the industry as a whole move VR forward for the good of everyone involved. Sometimes that means being the first to test some things to see what works and what doesn't. We appreciate all of the feedback, blah, blah, blah. We love this domain so much. And Tommy is a real gaming pioneer and is a bit of the secret sauce behind Candy Crush, where he worked previously at King Games. And I will ping Tommy, and I are good friends on Facebook Messenger, so I will see if I can get an additional context and see if he might want to join us now that it's been clear why they're not doing it. We'll make it a very softball little interview and get an update on Resolution Games and everything they're working on. Someone jumped in there?
Tyler. Yeah, just me. I was just going to say, this kind of really fits in with a curious thing that I noticed with Oculus as a gamer myself, more so in my younger days. But the pricing on Oculus is really sort of out of balance with a lot of the rest of the gaming world. For instance, especially VR. If you look at Steam and their Vive headsets, or even you can use the Oculus with Steam. Games on there, you can pick them up for about £10-15. When it comes through to the actual Oculus in-store, if you want to buy the version that just runs on the headset that Facebook that owns and has developed, without any external system supporting it, you're quite often looking at. I mean, they started about £14 and go all the way up to £28. And those, not only they're more expensive than any other platform, but they're actually shorter. So quite often you're paying around you'll be paying about $30 a lot of the time. I don't know exactly what the US store prices them at, but around between $25 to $30 for a game that only gives you about 2-3 hours worth of content. And that's always been a strange, curious thing, because they're essentially mobile games, really, the way that they're sort of developed and designed and whatnot, a lot of it. So it kind of all comes together now, because the intention was never to have it as a viable ecosystem for buying it outright. The intention, by the looks of it, is going to be free to play with ads. And yeah, that just kind of, it all fits together for me.
Yep. Other big news going around the tech sphere at the moment is Amazon has ordered 1,000 autonomous driving systems from a self-driving truck startup called Plus, and acquired the option to buy up a 20% stake in the company, and no doubt they will buy the entire goddamn company. That is an incredibly easy prediction, folks. That's what we call a gimme, because Amazon cannot automate fast enough on multiple fronts. As we covered, they're not only automating the trucks from the suppliers to their factories and from the factories to the inner cities, but then they're also automating from the inner city to your doorstep with their now piloting automated self-driving kind of kiosks of sorts. They're kind of like these miniature half-size cars that when they pull, you get notified. People always wondered, how could we track our packages in real time to our door? Well, that's still a little bit expensive to put tracking devices on every single package, but in fact, they don't need to. Because what they do is when they load up the little autonomous driving buggy, half-size car that leaves their inner city factory and drives it to your door, you can track that vehicle, which is driving around all day around your town, delivering those packages, and you can see it like an Uber vehicle inside of your Uber app. You can see its route, and they can tell you within a minute precisely when it will arrive at your door, hours in advance, so you can plan to be home when it gets there. And if you can tell the app in advance, yes, I will be home at that time, or come back tomorrow. And you can imagine what an incredible headache that solves for everybody involved on both sides. And even better, if you are home when the vehicle arrives, you then get an SMS with a code as it's arriving, which allows you to unlock the vehicle and receive your package. And we got a little glimpse of that a couple of days ago. It's truly a beautiful solution. In addition to, of course, the self-flying drones, because they likely will give you the option to have your package, if it's less than a few kilograms, the option to have it delivered within 30 seconds by a drone flying over your house, which they're now testing in Helsinki, Canberra, and a few other locations, which they seem to be making good progress on, because we just got another headline in the past few days that they just acquired, upgraded their drone testing. That seems to be making good progress on that front. So it'll be an interesting option. You can have the little half-size car robotic autonomous car do the delivery for you in 3 to 4 hours, or you can have the drone come in the next 3 to 4 minutes as e-commerce is exploding everywhere. And there was a headline also in our last session about 12 hours ago that Amazon's competitor in the East called Alibaba also just launched 1,000 autonomous vehicles to do what we call the last meter delivery to your door. And that turns into a whole other conversation about locker solutions on your doorstep and blah, 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 and the Ring cameras on your door and why Amazon bought Ring and how they can have access into your house if you give them the password to your house. And it's a very interesting development to see how that whole logistics chain will play out in the end, from the moment you click buy on Instagram and how that whole process plays out to the product arriving at your door. But it doesn't stop there, because half the time that product at your door is not what you thought it would be, and you want to return that thing. And there was a huge headline yesterday, breaking news out of ITV in the UK, and thank you to my buddy Mike Butcher, the editor-at-large of TechCrunch, for sharing it, that it's, again, ITV claimed it was an exclusive. They had internal footage of an Amazon warehouse in the UK, which was quite concerning, that they are destroying 100,000 items, returned items per week, and sending them to landfills, because that's the cheapest way to handle that situation. That's the economically best thing to do for your shareholder value. But although now that that's been revealed, no doubt there will be journalists trying to see if this is happening at other Amazon warehouses as well. And this relates.
This happens. This happens everywhere in retail, though. I mean, they do this. They call it Cal. I don't want to give away any secrets, and you do it way more than I do. But they drop things to a penny, and they write them off, right? And they throw them in a dumpster, and they try as hard as they can not to sell it to you if you happen to find it on a shelf.
Well, yeah, by the way, if you call them and say, I'd like to return this, as we now know, they often tell you to just keep it, and they'll refund you the money rather than having you send it back. But
No, but you mentioned it yesterday, like what IKEA is doing. What they'll do is they create outlet stores and stuff. So
exactly.
Amazon will create the physical. Now they're getting into the physical space and understanding it and just getting into it. They're like, you could create very easily a branded outlet store. It could even be behind the big grocery stores, right? You just have an attachment to that. But they'll resolve it something like that if they get a lot of
Right.
backlash to
Correct.
that. But the economics of it is the return, etc. I mean, it's a game that all the retailers get into now with the outlet game. And actually, the younger people, especially in apparel, the younger segments, right, just absolutely love the whole experience of seconds and just getting into that. So they can make a virtue of it if you like. No, it's not going to be hard for them.
Yes, and that was sort of.
And then other people, and they already take these seconds and put them in big boxes and sell it cheap to someone else, who then breaks it apart and sells stuff on eBay and things like that. So I'm not sure why they're not continuing to do that, because that's certainly very popular YouTube videos.
It's because
them.
it's because those sellers end up competing against them on their premium product. I mean, that's kind of the game that those arbitrage players play, is that, if it's on sale for $300 on Amazon, they're going to sell it on eBay for as close as $300 as they possibly can. So all of a sudden they're losing the sale to someone that bought basically something for pennies on the dollar. So it's just easier to trash it.
That's true, but still, throwing it away is pretty awful.
Oh, yeah. I hate it. I grew up poor, so I hold on to everything.
Well, it's also an eco thing. I don't know if anyone mentioned it, but there was articles about how terribly it is from an ecological point of view to manufacture things and then just throw them in the dumpster without being used. I mean, that's a lot of emissions that you're causing right there.
Right, and it's
pretty bad all the way around.
In a large number of cases, there's nothing wrong with the items at all. There's nothing damaged or whatever. It was somebody who ordered something and it didn't fit as they liked or whatever, and it wasn't exactly as they liked it, so they returned it because they have free returns. And the interesting innovation or kind of development is that in a related headline from a week ago, and by the way, I just tweeted out the videos of Amazon, the internal warehouse employee footage that was revealed yesterday in the UK of them destroying items. But that it's maybe not a coincidence at all, is it, that Amazon just announced in the past 48 hours or so that these new supermarkets that they just launched in their hometown of Seattle will allow customers to bring their returns there rather than having to ship them, which is a friction that a lot of people don't deal with. So the ability to physically return items to a physical store becomes very, very interesting indeed, as Amazon will eventually take over the entire supermarket industry in the US. And then all of those supermarkets will become return centers for Amazon goods, which we can hope will allow them to resell pre-opened items, as IKEA sort of does for their returned items. As you approach the cash registers at the end of the wonderful IKEA rat maze, they have heavily discounted items that were returned previously. Let's hope they do the same with Amazon. That could be very interesting indeed.
Well, they had that pre-COVID at Whole Foods, and I thought it was great. You didn't have to box it up; you just literally handed it over, and that was it. Then you were done, and so it was great. And then with COVID, they stopped doing that, but I guess they'll open that up again pretty soon, at least in the U.S.
As an American, can I also kind of bring up the 800-pound gorilla that never gets mentioned, and that's Target? Like, most of our life revolves around Target in the suburbs, at least, and they do what's called drive up. So you can order at any Target in America and set up a drive up. And so, like, tomorrow I'm going to Vegas for a trade show, and I got to pick up a TV. So I'm ordering the TV. I'm driving up. I'm picking up baby food at the Target closest to the hotel. I'm doing all these things. And I sit in my car, got 3 kids in it, sleeping sometimes, and they walk up with a whole cart of crap and load it up in the back, and you drive off. And, for us, that was a huge friction that got removed for me in my post-COVID.
Yep. There's another big headline at the moment in the tech sphere that TikTok has quite an announcement. They call it TikTok Jump, letting creators enhance their videos with mini app integrations. Oh boy, another prediction coming to fruition. And this one is, as I said many months ago, as was happening in Asia, is now coming to the US, where TikTok is now going to let the creators may no longer need to put a link in their bio, which was kind of the clever hack that YouTube stars are doing and TikTokers are doing to kind of drive you to other app integrations. And so today, TikTok announces Jumps, a new way for creators to add interactivity to their videos via third-party integrations, like e-commerce, perhaps. So, for example, a cooking video could feature a list of ingredients via Whisk, a recipe sharing app. You might also be able to add a quiz via Quizlet and breathing exercises via Breathwork. The company has beta tested this feature before. As of today, all users will be able to see and interact with these new TikTok Jumps, but only a select group of creators will actually be able to add them to their content. Again, a little bit of a verification system underway here. Some of the platforms that will have been approved to work with Jump include the aforementioned Whisk, Quizlet, as well as Wikipedia, Tablog, and others like BuzzFeed, Jump Rope, IRL, Watcha will launch in coming weeks. Examples of added content include movie reviews, beauty tutorials. The closest competitor to Jump would be Snapchat's Minis, which are essentially mini apps that let you buy movie tickets through third-party providers. Again, social commerce, everybody. Welcome to the future I've been predicting for 3 months steadily. The influencer is going to be selling stuff. They no longer really care about your hearts and your follows. They want you to buy the click buttons of the shit they're promoting in their little Snapchat and TikTok videos. And that's the future, folks. They're going to be making a living off of these apps, as Mark Zuckerberg says, not just a few extra dollars. WeChat, the popular Chinese messaging app, also has its own line of mini apps. Yeah, no shit. That's where it started, you idiot, Ed Engadget, who wrote this. Sorry, these American tech journalists often don't understand where these products and services start from. And in fact, we really should credit Pinduoduo in China. for pioneering this massive new wave of what we call social commerce by combining social media and e-commerce, Amazon and Facebook, or more accurately in the US, Shopify and Instagram, as was just launched. And that this is, so it's now, these social media apps have now made the announcements. Google made the announcement that they're bundling Shopify with YouTube, for example, so that you can buy all the products within the YouTube videos thanks to Shopify. And Facebook made the announcement in their own very subtle way during their big event. And now they've made all the announcements. And now we're just this week in the most recent updates. Some beta testers of the early versions of these apps in the US are now seeing buy buttons in their Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube feeds. And I can tell you, it has fundamentally changed life in Asia. It's going to change the game in a way you just cannot imagine, because when these influencers are able to sell stuff directly through, without you ever leaving their TikTok video or their Instagram video, they are going to start realizing, wow, I'm making serious money now from people buying my shoes. They click on my shoes and they buy them. You know what? Rather than make a 1 minute video, why don't I do a 10-hour live stream? And when people are looking at my shoes and they can click on the live stream and buy my shoes and my shirt and any other product I hold up to the camera, and I'm going to have a whole desktop of shit behind me ready to sell. I'm going to do a 10-hour live stream all day, 7 days a week, and hold up the products one by one and promote them. And then the people watching live can ask questions live while I'm pitching the product in the comments. And
you'd be great at it, Tyler. You would be an absolute natural at that, man.
I've been watching it for 9 months nonstop. It's an absolute revolution here in Thailand and all across Southeast Asia. This is the absolute game
That's
changer.
what we need, more QVC channels.
That's what I was going to say.
Yep. It's real. Anyone has their own QVC channel, and people are becoming literal billionaires doing it. That's how big it is. The lipstick king of Asia is now worth $1 billion selling products through his own little Facebook live streaming. It was Pinduoduo in this case. That's how big it is. You're going to get people becoming billionaires selling shit on these live streaming social commerce apps. So when I say these influencers are going to make a living, oh yeah, I'm talking about a living. I'm not talking about a few dollars selling a few shoes. I'm talking about these influencers become the interface that then partner with factories, because the factories realize, shit, this individual's got 100,000 followers and they're adding 5,000 followers a day. Why don't we as the factory partner with you? Here's all of the shit we make in our factory. You just stand there and do it on the camera, and then you get a big cut as now the interface, as the face of all of these products, because your fans trust you as this, celebrity or whatnot. And now you understand how the game's going to change. This is not some small potatoes thing.
Whoever becomes the drop shippers of choice for these influencers is going to be king.
And speaking of the collapse of civilization, can we go into eco news
for
a bit? So
Thank
kind of really
okay, if I can add, I'm sorry, Dan, just 1 second. But to Tyler, to your point, what we're missing though is audio is going to change the game, because what you're talking about is a mass feedback customer service loop instead of a binary one-to-one customer service.
Yeah.
So if you add audio on that, like a clubhouse room, right? So this influencer is doing everything on Facebook, blah, 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 and this and that. But you need to have something where people are actually talking in real time about the product they received,
Yep.
Like, yeah, I love these Nike Jordans. And that's going to be, in my opinion, the game changer.
Yeah.
When you've got 1,000 people or 600 people on audio saying, yeah, I love this, and this is why.
Yeah, let me explain, Ellis.
I just tweeted an article from LVMH regarding this.
Okay, so I'll retweet it right now. But LS, what it is it's video, and it's vertical video, like you're watching a TikTok video, and the person is selling stuff live. You can talk to them in the chat, and there's oftentimes tens of thousands of people watching this live together, because the people who are really good at it, and Dave says I would be good at it, I would not compete with the people who are really good at it, because the people who are really good at it become like Robin Williams on a mountain of cocaine, and they're wildly entertaining. And there's going crazy, ringing the bell, ding 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 ding, and it becomes a game show. And it's become a new form of entertainment. It's become more entertaining than traditional TV. And so people are watching this for hours, and many people are buying. Hundreds of people are commenting in real time, and they're talking with the host of the QVC in real time, and they're leaving reviews for the products as well. So that's all part of it. You could do a non-video form of this in Clubhouse, of course, but I think the biggest potential for what some people call social audio and what Spotify and Facebook now call live audio is, for the example, in Spotify, when they integrate that with their million creators, which are almost essentially musicians at this point, and the musicians have their own rooms in Spotify, because every artist in Spotify will have a room that's part of their profile page, and they already have, every artist has 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. Some artists have 1 million followers, and so those rooms will have tens, hundreds, millions of followers of those rooms, so that when those fans want to play their songs, that Taylor Swift songs together, Taylor Swift's 10 million fans will all be in the Taylor Swift room listening to Taylor Swift songs together. She gets paid for every stream now, and when they play a song together in that room, that's 1 million streams, by the way, for one song. And they're playing.
Holy shit.
And then
But Tyler, what I was saying,
I didn't even get to the good part yet, my friend, because now she's seeing all of that data as part of the analytics she already has as a Spotify artist. She's then going to be incentivized to jump into that room and start playing songs from her toilet with her guitar. And imagine what happens when BTS, the world's biggest act that ever existed, makes the Beatles look like your garage band next door, jumps into their Spotify room. That's going to break the fucking internet.
But I was even thinking decentralization. I'm talking about, let's say, Louis Vuitton, and you've got 100 women that bought it in Thailand, specifically. They don't even want the influencers. They just want to do their own group. The spinoff of that decentralization, I think, will come as a derivative. That's what I'm saying. In addition to the centralization of what you just described.
So just before,
yes, LS, I love.
Sorry, it's Fiona, but
Hey, Fiona.
There's two things. I mean, when you look at Kering, actually, the French beauty and bag company my friend is an environmental lawyer. They have some of the most advanced cradle to cradle technology, looking at textile, looking at the leather, the tanneries, and taking, I won't say full responsibility, but they are certainly working on more than I've seen anywhere else in the world on toxic chemical cleanup. So I do think that there's this edge since you did mention Louis Vuitton, and since it's part of the brands that the two of the French billionaires own, this is the issue, is some of them aren't wanting to sell more. They're actually moving ahead on a different philosophy. So, I mean, there's a lot to look at Kering, Kering. If you haven't had a good look, they have more environmental scientists and working on their corporate social responsibility and, looking at sustainability. So I'm just saying, the world doesn't need more. We need less. And so this whole push, whether it be on Clubhouse or Clubhouse compared to Green Room, how do we market? How much do we sell? I mean, how much are we going to actually stop? And so that's Fiona. But I have one announcement, since Dan was saying something. So the news is decarbonize.org, Rainforest Protection, Act Now, Forest Labs, Indigenous Women co-led scientists team has been chosen as one of the top contestants for X Prize Rainforest Team. So we are going to be using technology to innovate and cultivate biodiversity protection and Indigenous rights and land entitlement. So
congrats.
There you go.
Congrats.
Yep.
And that is Nantar Inga, who is leading it. She's our Indigenous Ecuadorian environmental scientist with Mayera, and her tribe has a land. She's an environmental lawyer her indigenous community has 200,000 hectares, which is larger than Ecuador. So she's our other co-leader, and our Shuar indigenous leader is Maria Clara, and she is a civil engineer, environmental engineer, a human rights activist, as well as a educator. And then we have our Maori team leader, and it goes on. So join in, everybody. We need as many hands on this to float that boat for the rainforest. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. That's awesome.
Okay.
So good, I guess a good tie-in to the next
Go
thing.
ahead, Dan.
And this is actually really kind of interesting because I think everybody knows when you burn coal power, it puts CO2 in the atmosphere, and the CO2 warms you. About that, and I think most people also know it's not the amount that you burned this year; it's the total amount you've ever burned that's accumulating in the atmosphere and warming the Earth over time. People don't know that coal also puts up smoke and reflect the sun away from the Earth and cool the Earth. And it's estimated that this smoke, which, by the way, the CO2 lasts in the atmosphere for hundreds to thousands of years, and the smoke lasts for a few weeks. But we kept putting more and more and more up, so it kept hiding about half of global warming. And so last year with COVID, there was a decrease in a lot of factories putting up smoke and coal. And also there's kind of a switch to natural gas, which doesn't have the aerosols. And so there's this article, which I did post under the Tech News Around the World on phys.org, physics.org. COVID-19 lockdowns temporarily raised global temperatures. And because of the lack of aerosols, it actually warmed the Earth, especially in Russia and the United States, increasing by about 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 0.37 degrees over much of the United States and Russia. This is something I was tracking because I realized it was going to happen because I knew about the aerosol problem, which, by the way, James Hansen calls this hiding of half our global warming with a very temporary bit of smoke, the Faustian bargain that we make by we're really warming the Earth more than we know. And this is kind of a big deal because as we get to, everyone says we have to get to net 50. But when we get to zero emissions, we will also stop putting this smoke in the atmosphere. Of things that will warm the Earth. One of them is another one. The fact that there's already actually the Earth has to warm more to balance the CO2 that's already up there. So those two things warm the Earth, and two things that will cool the Earth are, one is the oceans keep taking up CO2 because it's based on the total amount, not the yearly amount. So the oceans will, and they take about 30% CO2 we put up in the first place, and that will continue on for a little while. And then the other thing, cool the Earth, is that some of the methane and other shorter term greenhouse gases that last for a couple of decades, and so in a way that will also help offset those two other warming things. And scientists therefore think, if we're lucky, when we finally stop emitting, that the temperatures will stay stable but elevated, and way, but they won't keep going up a lot. So we'll see if they're right about that.
Thank you, Dan.
On aerosol cooling and this recent article about how COVID exposed, it sort of did a science experiment for us to see how much aerosols were actually acting on the climate temperature. So anyway, hope that was interesting.
Thank you. Well, here's something truly interesting, as Andrea just DM'd me. So when Taylor Swift and BTS choose to use their Spotify live streaming rooms with their millions of fans, what happens when they start saying things that some governments don't like? Oh, what a great question. Taylor Swift does a big anti-China rant in her Spotify room. Oh boy. Oh boy, what a wonderful question that is. Yeah, because I guess she could do it at her own concerts and there's nobody to hold responsible but for her. But when she does it on a platform, it gets very interesting indeed. That's such a fun question. Thank you for that interesting thought. Florian sent in an interesting article. Florian, are you here? You want to read this one about ad tech changing the privacy game? This is really interesting. It's a
Yes, it's. Let me just pull it up.
I got it.
Getting
I
lost
got it
here.
right here. Ad tech is facing the loss of another important signal, which is the IP address.
Correct.
Apple and Google are making more changes to hide signals typically used for targeting advertising. Exactly right, as I've been saying now for quite a few weeks. Glad to see the tech press is starting to. It's only 3 weeks late on this narrative. Essentially, to again for the slow kids in the class and the tech journalists, what's going on is Apple and Google are products, smartphones, and laptops. Facebook is an ad network. I know you think it's a social network. It's not. It's an ad network that it gets its data from a social network, and they trick you into giving you all of your data to power their ad network. And then people pay to target you and other people in very specific ways. They want very handsome bald men that are, with high IQs, who like to talk a lot, have a huge ego, and that's no offense, Florian, no offense, but then you've got Google itself is an ad network powered by a search engine. And people type in all kinds of interesting stuff of what they are interested in, where they're going, what they're doing. And then advertisers use that information to target, again, other beautiful people on stage who won't be named. And those ad networks, that is their business. That's how they make money. And they power those ad networks via a social network in Facebook's case, or a search engine in Google's case. Now, Apple is your device, and that's the source of the data. And where you are, everything you type, everything you do, all the cookies is on the device. All the IP addresses come through the device. And Apple doesn't like Facebook anymore. And they're telling Apple CEO Tim Cook is telling Facebook's CEO Mark Zuckerberg, we don't like you anymore. We're taking our ball, which is our customer, and all their data, and we're going home, and you can go die. You can go see that river over there. You can go jump in it and drown your damn self, because we're going to build our own ad network, because that's what we're going to do. Because we've sold the iPhone, we're selling iPhones every year to everybody, and all these laptops, and it's getting a little saturated. And people don't need another new iPhone every year, because the incremental increase of the benefits of the next iPhone are now getting quite small. That's an extra 10 minutes of battery life. The screen's just a little bit better. The camera's just a little bit better. Maybe you don't need a new iPhone this year after all, because that's just a tiny bit better for $1,000. So, and they see that the end of that process coming. And so now they're going to build an ad network, which is, just like Facebook and Google did, because they have the data themselves. It's their data that Facebook has been sucking out of your phone in the form of cookies and IP addresses and everything else. And by the way, we know this because Apple and Google are telling us this. Google saying we're ending cookies and we're going to create our own thing called FLOCs, FLOC, Federated Learning of Cohorts, which give us everything that we need, but makes it hard for all of the other ad networks to compete. Apple's doing the same. And now this article from Florian takes it one step further and saying they're not just removing the cookies and locking in everything else. They're now obfuscating the IP addresses, according to this article from Adweek, and they would know. And Andrew, who wrote the article, would know. So I'm tweeting this out, and thank you, Florian, for sharing this. But it's another indication that IP addresses are fundamental to the functioning of the internet, but they can also be used to serve targeted ads and build digital profiles without users' knowledge. And Apple and Google are making more changes to hide these IP addresses from other competing advertising networks. And now you know why. Because Tim doesn't like Mark, and he's taking his ball home, and he's building his own ad network. And you can talk about that at your next company party when when your coworkers start wondering what's really going on. Why is my Facebook ads? Have you noticed that Facebook ads aren't as accurate as they used to be? And you'll say, yeah, you know why? It's because Tim doesn't like Mark, essentially.
And Tim's putting out better cameras, Tyler, as well. So
Boy.
his signals are going to be off
Oh
the
boy.
charts.
Oh. There's more. Did you think we were done? No. There's more. So what does Mark do? Mark is not a stupid person. He's not going to go down. He's going to build his own damn ball, in the form of a Facebook smartwatch, which they just announced, 5-6 days ago. And this smartwatch is going to give them a whole lot of that data that they needed, that juicy, sweet data that they need to power their ad network. They're now going to get from your smartwatch, because they're going to get all kinds of info from that smartwatch. And
Tyler,
And
yes.
this is
just
Michelle
Hey,
speaking.
Michelle.
Go
sorry.
ahead, Florent. No, I just wanted to add that the IP address change, I would say it's slightly old. Well, if you're in the ad tech
Yeah.
space, what we're going to see now is what's called prediction modeling. So, I mean, clearly there's a bit of a shift now, and things are a bit shaky. But as we're moving forward, you'll see a lot of those network having prediction modeling. So it's not going to be that off accurate as we expect it to be now.
Yep. Well, because
But
you
Tyler,
can start doing
Tyler,
really
quick question.
clever things with data and AI. And like she says, predictive modeling, AIs can make predictions that kind of blow people's minds. When you apply AIs to data and machine learning algorithms to data, you can do things that humans don't think is possible. And Dave jumped in with a quick point that was worth reiterating, which is the cameras on your devices, namely your iPad Pro, by the way, as the reviewers have noted, has a shockingly good camera on the selfie side of the camera. I mean, truly mind-blowingly good. Like, you can stand on the other side of your living room and do a Skype call, and it will zoom into your face. Say what? Yeah, you heard me right. That camera is wildly upgraded, and so will be the upcoming selfie cameras on your future MacBooks and iPhones and all of your devices, because with those much more high fidelity cameras, they will be able to get much more interesting data from your face that you never thought was possible. Shall I read the list yet again?
Can I, Tyler, quick
Always.
question.
Hold on. Let me read
Okay,
the list
Tyler,
of what they can get with these new upgraded cameras. Your gender, your age, your physical health, if you've had concussions, chronic pains, vision disorders, obesity or Parkinson's disease, your mental health, if you have depression, PTSD, autism, or eating disorders, your drug consumption of alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, MDMA, and cannabis, amongst other things. Yes, from your iris, like a doctor looking into your eye. He can tell these things too, in some sense, but machine learning algorithms can do this in a masterful way with these very high fidelity cameras, which, by the way, are not just in your devices like your upcoming phones and iPads and laptops, but as our friend Jeremiah revealed with us yesterday, they're also going to be in your future retail stores like the Amazon Go stores. When you look up at the roof, it has blindingly white light. And what's hiding behind that blinding white light? Lots of cameras that are strategically placed to get 3D renderings of your face and all kinds of juicy information about your face. Because, by the way, there's no staff in these stores. They already knew who you were before you even arrived at the store. And they knew what item you were going to pick off the shelf before you put it in your cart. And so they don't even need
This is exactly
staff in the stores.
sorry,
Go ahead, Kai.
but does it,
Tyler. This is exactly why Facebook and all the mobile phone giants, including Apple, are investing so much money and buying so many important patents around
Yeah.
XR technology.
Yes.
Oh, that is a sum of VR, AR, and MR, because the essence of a AR or XR or MR glasses
Yeah.
is that there's a set of cameras that is scanning the environment
Yep.
combined with GIS information
Yep.
and your daily habit.
Yep.
And that data richness
Yes.
is humongous.
Yes.
Just absolutely everything.
Yes. And so, Kai,
And it's so close to your eye as well. So it can capture your eyes focus.
correct.
And where your head, turning your head.
Yes. So Kai, your microphone's bad. Let me just repeat the profound insight that he's dropping there, which is also simultaneous to this. Facebook and Google and Apple are notably, because they have their ad networks, remember, and they power their ad networks with data, remember, and that's where VR comes in. And this is why, as Kai says, but his microphone was very weak. They are so heavily invested in VR and AR, because in the near future, you will be wearing their glasses as you walk around town, which can also track your eye and what you're looking at. And by the way, that smartwatch and that Apple Watch can track your heart rate and your biometric response to what you're looking at. So they'll know what you're looking at and how you're physiologically responding to whatever it is you're looking at. But that's just the beginnings of the mountains of data they're now going to be able to have as you walk through stores and the shelves. And by the way, you go into that Amazon store, right, which has no staff, and you can put those items in your cart and walk out. Or you're now going to have, if you're wearing an AR glass, you could click with your fingers, just clicking your thumb to your middle finger. Your smartwatch will know that you're clicking, and you can buy the virtual alternative of that bag of spaghetti, because the bag of spaghetti in the shop physically is, $7, but or you can buy it from a competitor who's advertising to you in real time. As you look at that bag of spaghetti, you're going to see a lower price that you can buy through the AR e-commerce site, because they know what you're looking at and they know you're about to put it in your cart. So why not sell it for 50 cents less right now? We'll have it delivered to your store by a drone in 30 minutes. So you can say,
Hello.
yes. Hold on, Messi.
I was
Florian's been waiting for 20 minutes. Go ahead, Florian.
Yes, Tyler, question here to you and to the geeks on stage. In that battle between Mark and Tim has the software and the gateway by its software to its hardware. So, quote, the camera. Does it mean that Mark needs to get access to his own hardware,
Yes.
or otherwise, basically, he will be always cut off by Tim?
That's what the watch is.
Yep.
That's what the camera watch is.
And it's going in a different layer too, because I kind of always say this is that for the first time, this data about you is not being well, I don't want to say first time. It's not, when you type a Google search, you have to push it, right? Like when you say something, you have to say it. This is something that can look at you and determine things about you. And that's why I believe Apple and others have chosen this time and this moment in time to really kind of draw the line in the sand, really present one as like the hero and one as the villain. And where Apple has an advantage is 5, 6 years, 10 years ago, if you said, your phone's going to have your thumbprint, right? Everyone would be paranoid that the government would come and use your thumbprint. But how they handled that is with their secure enclave. And I believe that's the path they're going to go. They're going to give you a box that's going to say, I consent to these items, and wrap it up in a package that they then present to the advertisers at the levels of consent you authorize. And so that's really going to be key to this. And so
Yeah.
your pricing
And
is going to
just
change. Your pricing when you shop is going to change based on your level of consent, and you would never know it. And it's just one little kind of side tangent there. Sorry.
And just to add to that, Chris's point, though, when Apple bought Beats, and people didn't understand why they, Dre's company for $1 billion. I think, to add on Chris's point, you're going to get ecosystems. And closed ecosystems, big tech, small tech, where everything is ubiquitously known. Amazon's doing stores in Orange County. I can tell you when I walk near a store and I'm not on Wi-Fi, my signals change. And I know it's a store because I've already confirmed it, and it won't be open until September. And the interesting thing about it is it's almost like China. You're just going to see these sort of systems where people opt in or they don't, but edge computing and more devices, not necessarily, it could be watches, it could be glasses, it could be a Fitbit. You're just going to see a device. That's why the IPs are being issued more and more to 1 trillion, devices. And we're going to have that where it's just syncing up to us very uniquely, and we will have those unique ads. And to Chris's point, we'll opt in. And if you buy it, let's say virtually, and forget getting it 2 hours later, let's say you want to wait 2 days, you get a 30% discount. You get a cheaper rate. So you can opt in on what you want, and then we get into these showrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
This is
Hang on.
speaking. If I can just,
Yeah, Messi. We let Florian jump in because Messi wanted to make a point.
No, I was just gonna quickly ask a question actually
Huh?
about like the Apple Watch, for example. How do they deal? How do they deal? I don't know if it was Chris that he mentioned a little bit about security, data security. For example, me as a one simple. Apple Watch user. The only thing I remember is when I first set it up, agreeing on the terms and things like that. But that's it. I didn't consent for them to collect, for example, closing my rings or the Nike Run or whatever. Even I didn't even set up the health app because I don't want them to collect my health data. So I just wonder, how are they collecting this individual health data, or am I already, like, I have already give them consent by agreeing on the very first time the terms and things that I clicked okay.
Right, Messi, let's give the example of your geographic data about where you are, which is quite valuable in and of itself, like you're at this particular restaurant or whatever. So it was revealed in court documents about 2 weeks ago, in the case of Google, for example, that they've intentionally made it, the employees were discussing amongst themselves on internal emails between Google employees, that they had made it a little easier for people. They were intentionally hiding the off switch, which enabled Google to have your geo data. And it was buried. It was difficult to find and turn it off. And then they made it a little easier for people to turn it off. And too many people turned it off. And the internal email said, shit, we need to make it hard again, because this is a problem now that people have found it and they're turning it off. That was revealed in court documents. They know they are intentionally making it difficult for people to turn these things off. As an example, Apple's unique in that they own the whole sort of stack of the hardware, the software, as LS or whoever was making the point previously. So they're kind of unique in that they can keep all the data within their own ecosystem, especially if they become the ad network, because then they can keep your data only within Apple's ecosystem from top to bottom, without actually revealing it. And that becomes, they're taking advantage of what they've built over the decades, which is this whole stack. And they're unique in that way. And Facebook doesn't have the whole stack. They don't have any hardware. And now you understand why they're rushing out some hardware, and they are getting out this smartwatch lickety split, because it's going to be hard to compete with your phone, but we need a lot of your data. So that's why the smartwatch is coming out. But Apple is uniquely positioned where they will be able to collect all your data and anonymize it in whenever need be to share it with outside of their ecosystems. That's their big pitch that they're making right now. One might even say that's their biggest pitch that they have to the consumers at the moment, is they're going to uniquely position themselves as friendly to you and your data and your privacy. Sorry, go ahead. It was,
and they're going to bring that into healthcare too. Sorry.
Right. Well, by the way, I got some new headlines to share on this, and indeed, they're going huge into healthcare, and that's why it's so important that they make everyone deal with all of this privacy and data issues now, because tech is about to consume health, as they did fintech and previously Hollywood and the music industry and everything. It was Michelle who was about to jump in. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, I just quickly wanted to say that I think hardware can surely amplify things when it comes to having that, like, a lot of signals, but I think we're also sometimes underestimating the power of on-site signals. So if you're on Google Shopping and you check out within Google, that they don't necessarily need an external player consent or getting the data from Apple, for instance. So I think, to someone's point, and that's what the Amazon ecosystem currently looks like. And that's why what the changes Apple is doing is no threat for Amazon, in the sense that most of their signals is purely on site, and they're very independent from other players, and they share very little with others. So that's what I wanted to add.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on to some headlines? I think Chris.
Tyler,
yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Is the irony here not that Apple is marketing itself on being good custodians of data, i.e., that advert, I walk around and the shopkeeper doesn't walk after me, etc., but yet they're going to be collecting more data than they ever collected before? I don't know. I'm just noodling on it's great marketing is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. It's going to get crazy in ways we can't yet anticipate, is the short answer, because when the Google Glass came out, which most folks probably won't remember, us old school geeks do, no doubt Chris does, it was a gimmick almost. It was kind of a recruitment tool. It was like, oh shit, Google's got this. What? Holy cow. And functionally, it wasn't that great. It was more like a status symbol within Silicon Valley for a little bit. And people who tried it were like, actually, this thing isn't nearly as good as I thought it was going to be. And so, they kind of shelved it iceboxed it, and they're no doubt working on upgrades to it as we speak, which should be coming out fairly soon, actually, and it will play along with your earbuds as well now. Which we didn't have previously, which will add a whole extra dimension to it, right? So now you can talk to, and by the way, we've got voice assistants now that we didn't really have then. So you can say, okay, Google, to your glasses that you really couldn't before. So the combination of these things make the technologies exponentially more powerful and useful, and dystopian and interesting. So it's but the reason I mentioned this is because when Google Glass came out, it made headlines when somebody walked into a bathroom with Google Glasses on, because it could record video without people really knowing. And that's why I say, as much as the engineers are sitting at these campuses, trying to contemplate every possible, use case and dystopian use case, they just cannot. And so time will tell how this all plays out in ways that we just are not going to be able to pre-anticipate. That's one thing we've been able to learn from tech is that the interesting actual real use case, positive use case, and negative dystopian use cases are quite surprising. So we will see.
I would love to just join into. It's Fiona.
Hey, Fiona.
Hi. So I'm not going to say which billionaire has been playing and buying up a massive amount of portfolio on this, but I have seen a lot of the IP purchases, because it's quite interesting, because when it was Walmart and Coca-Cola and PG&E and several of the other large groups that were all in this internal dark room preparing, yes, if you touch that bottle, all of a sudden you're going to get that discount, and the sensors on in the shop, how it reads even your breath, some of the sensors that can see how you react to that purchase, whether you are anticipating, whether you want it. There's so much that this data is being analyzed for, and the question is, who an ethics of where is it going to go. I mean, that was interesting, because this was even 5-6 years ago, looking at that VR and the AR, and some of the patents were something that I was involved in, so I knew quite a bit of what was going forwards. But it's that question of who's looking and who's gaining from it, and where do you lock it down, and where's the ethics to support yourself to say, hey, how much more are they coming into our spirit territory, our healing territory, our personal space, and how much can we protect ourselves?
Now you sound like indigenous tribes worried about the cameras taking their souls when they take photos.
Well, I was a photojournalist,
go.
And that's why I stopped. But that's also why the X Prize team. Oh, you know that. Thanks, Tyler. Now you get me on that good old. That was my old South China Morning Post days in Asia Week. But that's that question about where and how, and that's where this X Prize team that we put together, as we also did the MIT Solve, but it's Indigenous run. Hands out for the rest of them, wrapping it in the Nagoya Protocol, looking at getting payment for their herbs, and where can we support them, and so that they can actually thrive and continue to help us thrive, because we will need the medicine with all this mess of technology. Okay. That's
Who was up?
Cheers.
Somebody was jumping in.
I was going to.
Oh, that was. Oh, I'm sorry. That was me, real briefly. I was just going to thank Fiona, and I think at the end of the day, Fiona, this is going to. And I've seen some and been a part of these patents 10 years ago as well. And I just think ultimately, hopefully, human. And I've said this in other rooms on Clubhouse ethics. We just do the yin yang, and hopefully, you have leaders like John was saying earlier, people who will just be accountable. Tyler and Cal would just watch it and try to just keep this, because it's really, if you know what's there, it's quite scary. And I've always been saying they've just been waiting to roll this out. And I know what I'm working on, and I think you just have to always have that check and balance for humanity, because ultimately, we're trying to, I think most people, if they can be held accountable and they make themselves accountable, I still believe we can have a better world. That's it.
And Carl, I'll hand it to you. And on that point, Sarah just shared an article from India is proposing tougher e-commerce rules to enforce that people have compliance officers on the ground. and kind of speaks to that point, is governments want to be able to arrest bad actors in real time in their territories, in their sovereign land. Anyway, go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to point out we were talking about Amazon and then healthcare, and Faraz about an hour ago, I don't know if we discussed it and I missed it, was tweeted about AWS's healthcare accelerator startup.
Yes, I did. I think I just retweeted it, didn't I?
It has got one retweet. Yeah, so maybe you did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go do it. That's
yeah.
huge.
I don't know if you.
That's huge. Go.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Faraz, is he here? I don't want to sort of steal his.
No,
No, I
he's
don't.
not here. Just go ahead.
Okay, yeah, fair enough then. So this is AWS. If anybody hasn't figured out yet, AWS likes doing these sort of startup and accelerator programs. They have their AWS Activate for startups, where you can go and get $100,000 in credits with them, in-house credits. That basically means you get to use their services for free as long as that $100,000 worth of credits sort of lasts. And they have a load of different ones for like education and NGOs and that kind of thing, and nonprofits. This one is a relatively new one that I've not seen before, which is the AWS Healthcare Accelerator, which is a 4-week technical, business, and mentorship accelerator opportunity open to US-based healthcare startups or international healthcare startups that have existing US operations. A cohort of 10 healthcare startup companies with an established product market fit with existing customers and revenue who seek to use AWS to solve the biggest challenges in the healthcare industry. They will be selected in this new program. And it goes on to sort of talk about how they've partnered with the likes of KidsX, which is the world's largest digital healthcare accelerator that's dedicated to pediatrics specifically. But they're saying that the goal of this is to cultivate and promote innovative startup solutions that achieve the quadruple aim, I'm not entirely sure what that is, of improved patient experience, improved clinician experience, better healthcare outcomes, and lower cost of care. Well, that must be the quadruple there. But what strikes this as interesting is two things. One thing they mention that in the US, in the first 10 weeks of the COVID-19 pandemic, apparently the CDC reported that there was a 42% reduction in emergency department visits to hospitals. So that's the normal. I mean, if the US is anything like the UK, the emergency department is one of the most like understaffed, overtaxed sort of departments in a hospital. And one of the biggest problems that you can have is the fact that people come in when they don't necessarily need to. And they have to sit there and they have to have space to sort of, queue up and wait and then get seen and then get shoved out the door and basically said, well, you didn't necessarily need to come in here. So I think what Amazon and the rest of sort of the digital healthcare, which we talked about a lot, is looking at is the fact, well, when COVID hit, a 42% reduction. Obviously, some of those people, yes, they probably did need to come in and didn't come in because of COVID, but a lot of those people are probably people who would never have come in, would have come in, but never needed to anyway. So this is sort of highlighting this percentage, this grouping of people that potentially contribute to the overtaxing of hospitals, specifically the emergency centres, that don't need to come in, that telemedicine and remote medicine and home visits can step in instead and sort of help ease, offload a little bit of the pressure. And the other thing I want to say on this personally is that, I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit cynical, but I don't think this is in any way altruistic. This is a fantastic way for AWS to scope the market and say, who do we want to buy?
Yep.
And I think this is probably where it's going to go.
Well, not only that, yeah, because they have this is the amazing thing about AWS and Google Cloud. Those two specifically. Microsoft has Azure, but AWS and Google Cloud, AWS and Google acquire a lot of companies. And by the way, they own the two biggest cloud platforms, and they get to see all of the data of those companies' growth, essentially, and in every country, right? So in every market in the world. So when they have a meeting, they already know how fast a company's growing to the hundredth of a percentile on a month per month, daily by daily basis, and everything else. So this gives them every indication they need before they even go into the meeting. They know if they want to buy the company. Almost, the only thing they need to know is how much they already know how much they're paying for their cloud hosting. But by the way, as one of the big cloud themselves, they can internalize that cost by acquiring these companies as well. And you can write that. It gets very interesting. AWS and Google both can become acquisition machines using their cloud data in a way. And that's the thought that most people don't think about. Them as investors, as VCs, have an almost unfair advantage against all the other VCs who are investing in tech startups because they have access to the actual traffic to and from the website.
Well, when you go in as a user, you can see all through their cloud platforms and everything else. You can see all the data of traffic and response timings and what people are requesting and where and whatnot. And there's almost so much data that the average sort of person doesn't know what to do with. But that's just the data that you get to see. AWS is constantly in the background automating the number crunching of all of this. Who's using the most? Who's having who currently on the platforms are having the fastest increase of sort of requests and traffic and that kind of thing. So you're spot on. For if you've got 100% of the data visible to you, they have 150% of it. So and the ability to crunch it in real time. So yeah, this is just going to be a really good way for them to scope out who to buy, who to sort of poke their nose in. And of course, they've got all the other stuff in the background to back all of this up. They're already talking about we've had the sidewalk thing, which is their step into the ISP sort of market and providing internet to IoT devices and everything else. And then they've got all the IoT devices. And so they can onboard from many, many, many different directions to make any possible sort of telemedicine easier. Why would you go anywhere else? Why would you want to partner with anybody else when it's so easy and so interconnected?
And
By
they
AWS?
just started doing COVID-19 rapid testing.
Yep.
I shared that earlier with you, Tyler. And then it's just crazy how fast the news moves in this room, because the president of my company sent me a message tonight saying that a program manager at Amazon's been contacting her. Last week, a VP at Amazon added me on LinkedIn. And so now it's all like, starting to make sense. It's just, it happens so fast. It's crazy.
Well, they
Well,
were.
Chris,
I'm sorry, just quickly, Alice, just because I want to respond to Chris. I'm trying to find the blog, but they have a blog about their COVID response, and one of them, which was a while ago now, it was about a month ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago, maybe. One of the things they were saying was they were part of the US government's official COVID response team as advisors. So they were literally sat side by side with the policymakers, discussing with them how to respond to COVID and how to help with COVID while delivering products, while delivering sort of number crunching and whatnot for some of the COVID algorithms that were trying to figure out what the US should put where and everything else, while sat there in the room with these policymakers, helping make the decisions as in an advisory capacity. And that was published from their own blog. So yeah, they've been deep in this since before COVID, but really stepped up their game during the pandemic.
Okay, a whole bunch of hot headlines coming in fast and furious from friends in the audience. Like Radeja sent in one about a German firm's air taxi aims to be operational for the Paris Olympics. Volocopter is kind of a well-known company. It's essentially a hybrid of a drone and a helicopter. Which assumedly will be autonomous. And you can see it. There's a photo of it in the tweet that I just sent out. And Messi on stage just shared a good one that Apple's App Store to face scrutiny in Germany. Apple's and the big tech companies indeed are coming under some heat in Germany. And tomorrow is the very big day indeed for the big tech companies in the US, where they're going to have the big 5 new bills that are being drafted on Capitol Hill to crack down on the big tech companies in the US, which the chronology of this is really interesting. Just to circle back, China 2 months ago cracked down on Alibaba with the world's largest IPO of Ant Financial, which they shelved, iced, 86th, took off the map, and Jack Ma's now doing finger painting in some very nice location somewhere. And then in the meantime, China cracked down on their other big tech companies, and the CEOs of the world's fastest growing companies in history, Pinduoduo and TikTok, resigned and are also probably doing finger paintings with Jack somewhere, as China's cracking down on their big tech companies. And then the US started cracking down on its big tech companies, and that was announced about 2 weeks ago, these 5 bills that'll now be on the floor tomorrow in the US. And then in the meantime, in the past week or so, the UK, India, Japan and now Germany have all announced they're all going to start cracking down, and the EU as well, holistically, are now going to crack down on the big US tech companies all simultaneously, just as they're about to kick off VR and AR and these better cameras and all this new data and these digital wallets and your digital health and your education and the infrastructure and the Wi-Fi and the fiber optic cables to power everything. And yeah, I guess the governments are getting a little nervous about these big tech companies that could potentially buy Greenland or Iceland and become a new mega political player, and that understandably makes them a little bit nervous. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Other hot headlines here's one country using tech and fighting back very literally. Israel just tested the world's first airborne laser weapon. Just tweeted this one out. It's like straight out of Star Wars, folks. Like when, like a lightsaber. The stakes of the 21st century warfare is rising. Israel's defense ministry has teamed up with a contractor called Elbit Systems Ltd. to develop the first airborne laser weapon capable of shooting drones out of the sky, in addition to other flying targets, according to a Monday statement from officials. And boy, oh boy, doesn't this just fit right in line with the scary ass conversation we had about 5 days ago about the future of drones, does it not? Where we discussed, to summarize, that now drones are becoming weaponized because they're very, very cheap, and you can attach nerve agents and poison to them, and they can have facial recognition, and they can we tweeted videos of drones attacking mannequins in a crowd, and they can hit the mannequin head on. And it was reported that a drone killed somebody. It was used in an autonomous way without a human operator to pull the trigger on an individual in Libya, a Turkish drone. And the drone manufacturers known and all of it. And the intelligence agencies are now saying that drones have become weaponized and militarized. And that becomes very interesting, as I said multiple times, in places like the Gaza Strip. Does it not? Because rockets are not that controllable, but drones sure are, especially when they've got facial recognition. And especially when, the Iron Dome that Israel has will not work against these drones because they're not flying in predictable patterns like rockets do. And so now you understand why Israel just announced they have just tested the world's first airborne laser weapon specifically designed against shooting drones out of the sky. Oh, wow. What an interesting coincidence, because when the drone conversation was revealed, just one little difficulty for Israel, of course, is the fact that Norway has developed micro drones the size of bumblebees, which can also have nerve agent poisons that the Kremlin may or may not be using, and Navalny may or may not be sipping on his tea, and put on doorknobs in the UK. And so what happens when you have these little bumblebee-sized drones with nerve agents? You're going to have a really, really good laser to shoot those down. But it's very interesting indeed. Israel's testing the world's first airborne laser weapon, namely to combat futuristic potential drone weapons that may or may not exist in some dystopian future that we may or may not have talked about a week ago. Interesting.
Just to clarify on this, the word first, and I think, Tyler, you knew this and you're highlighting it, but the word first there is referring to the fact that it's designed to combat drones, not so much the airborne laser thing, because both Boeing and Lockheed have been working on this for years and years and years, and there have been programs that have come in and out to try and use airborne and seaborne weaponized lasers.
In fairness, the Death Star itself was kind of a big laser shooting.
Exactly. And that came out, at least 30, 40 years ago.
That was the 70s, 80s. I mean, the Imperial forces were really ahead on this stuff, if you think about it.
Then there's that movie where they filled a house with popcorn and hit it with that plane with the laser.
Oh, boy. American pop culture never fails. So
Tyler, STM, which is a Turkish company, seems to be one of the
that's right. That's the drone
rapidly developing experts in this field. And interestingly, there's a news announcement that they've deployed a 500 drone squadron now which they're using in Syria, and they've also sold drones to the Ukraine.
And somebody just DM'd me in the audience that a vice president at Amazon just followed them, and they just DM'd me to.
That was me,
Uh-huh.
Tyler. That was my
Oh,
receipts
there you
on
go.
that previous statement
Uh-huh.
that they're getting into med tech in a big way. I couldn't figure out what he was, why he was hitting me up on LinkedIn, and with the last story, and then that other story. The other link I talked to you about is they want to get into space medicine in a big way, and that's really kind of our big value proposition, is that we believe we're the the digital factory of space at some point.
Yep. Spielberg, one of Hollywood's biggest producers, if not the biggest, inks a multi-year deal with Netflix. Wow. Netflix ain't joking around. This is one of the stories that continually updates, is how the big tech platforms are taking over content, in the Hollywood being just one form of them. And Amazon acquired MGM, Netflix partnering with Spielberg, and somebody else. Thank you to whoever sent that in. And there was another headline of another massive acquisition in the space also that escapes me, but hopefully we'll circle back to it. There was an article yesterday that bears repeating. I think it was Florian who sent this in, that robots may soon be able to reproduce without this change. Oh, will this change how we think about evolution? Nature is full of examples of biology adapting to its surroundings. Technology may just be about to catch up in the form of self-replicating robots. So just tweeted that article out. Shopify stock heads for new records as excitement builds for their Unite conference. Analyst says June 29th conference may bring announcement of ad-related offering. Oh boy, that's 7 days away from now. So next week, let's see if they have a live stream that we can follow together, as Shopify is one of the most interesting companies in tech at the moment, as they are empowering not only the social media sites to link to e-commerce, but now it was announced yesterday that they've partnered with, remind me, somebody, who was it, the publisher they partnered with? Jesus, what was it? Some very big blog, like Huffington Post, but not Huffington Post. Anyway,
BuzzFeed, right?
BuzzFeed, thank you. So Shopify enables e-commerce essentially, and now they're helping social media influencers monetize their followings by connecting with little Shopify shops built into other little social media apps, which is clever enough. But now they're also partnering with other kind of influential blogs of sorts, like BuzzFeed, and no doubt they'll do it with Huffington Post and everybody else. And that's so we will, hopefully they'll do a live stream we can watch.
Your investment in them may help you with that new island you're looking for.
You think, Cal? You think those 2 points are related?
Yeah.
My recent tweet about island shopping and my recent investment in Shopify.
Yeah, you gotta figure out where to use it, right? You gotta figure out, especially I'm gonna make a connection, especially when you're also saying how these remote islands are going to be useful places for remote workers. That ding
a
ding
little
ding,
thesis
as they say.
developing here, perhaps. People
A
fleeing,
little thesis on
people fleeing America
Tyler
due to
Streets.
lack of water and energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gee, I wonder if people are going to flee areas that are becoming droughts and losing energy on the grid, and start realizing start coming to places that have more water than they used to as a result of climate change, and abundant food and abundant self-controlled energy systems, and are major food exporters. I just wonder if these people are actually going to up and move. What interesting headline from 2 days ago, that the largest exodus in America is Baltimore, followed by San Francisco. Oh, geez, what a weird coincidence. People are fleeing San Francisco more than any other city in America except for Baltimore, the lovely paradise that no one's ever referred to as an armpit of Baltimore. Yeah. Yeah, people are going to flee the drought and seek higher ground, metaphorically, although in this case they're seeking water and food and security, because there was another viral video this week of people walking into Walgreens and walking out with shopping bags full of goods unimpeded, as it's now a lawless wasteland. Well done, California. Yeah, people are going to be fleeing for safety and security. It's this thing called Maslow's pyramid hierarchy of needs. You should look into it. People like security and food and water, which California no longer has, so, and that's why they're fleeing. Two places that have water and their own food production. And yes, California did used to produce a lot of food when they had water. But now they don't. So they won't. So people will flee. It's real simple. Spend a few years investigating this, and you'll end up where I am, and in a flat bottom, aluminum bottomed boat in a coral surrounded island that is not enterable by boats, unless you have your own very specialized aluminum flat bottom boat that only you can enter. And you can buy
or a helicopter.
my ebook for just $5,000, or hire me as a consultant. When go ahead and use the tip jar, folks. Send $100. I'll jump on a call with you and explain to you how to protect yourself from the ensuing apocalypse. And by the way, tip number one.
He's kidding, right?
Yeah. Tip number one: don't put a huge sign on your island that says "I grow my own food and energy and have Wi-Fi here from a satellite." And by the way, hiding lots of gold bars here. Don't put a big sign on your island that attracts the boats driving by that you have that stuff. That's tip number one. And by the way, select a coral surrounded island next to other really big populated islands that have lots of resources that people are going to want. And then you just be another 10 kilometers out of the way on what appears to be a limestone rock floating in the ocean with no perceivable value. Just a couple tips you might want to think about. Oh, and by the way, make sure it's kind of difficult to approach via boat or any other means, and do militarize it, and do marry the boss of the army. That kind of helps too. Just a little tip just a little tip that you might want to think about if you're a little bit concerned about this upcoming apocalypse. Never mind. Back to the headlines, folks. Shopify is going to do their conference, and you should have bought stock when we told you to several weeks ago. You yourself would be buying an island right about now if you did what we suggested. So stay tuned. AWS announces, as we covered, AWS Healthcare Accelerator. Yep, as Carl said, it's concerning on levels that are more than meets the eye, just like the IP address obfuscation. And there is a story from Reuters that Iran stores more oil tankers as it counts days to enter the markets because the U.S., and this gets right back into the whole heart of the global matter. And I was glad to hear that some people are reading Peter Zeihan's Disunited Nations, which everyone should do if you want to understand how this apocalypse is going to play out in real time, as it is, specifically in the Middle East, with regard to Iran and their oil and China. And then you'll understand how it's really all going to shake out in really wild ways that people just fundamentally don't understand at the moment. But when you do read Disunited Nations, then you'll understand this headline from Reuters of Iran storing lots of oil tankers, and why America took over one of the oil tankers and is now selling that oil in the U.S. So it's kind of outside of the tech sphere, but is part of my consulting services. So there you go. The Economist has a headline that some countries, and thanks to whoever tweeted this one in, they did a survey of the free speech in different countries and how those citizens feel about their free speech. And by the way, some countries feel they have too much free speech, and some feel they don't have enough. And we just tweeted this out from The Economist. In some countries, people think they have too much free speech. A new survey shows that Kenya, Nigeria, Tunisia citizens reckon there is too much liberty to give offense. And there's a chart that shows how much free speech countries have, and then how much the citizens feel they have, if they feel it's too much or not enough. It's a really, really interesting chart. And of course, Denmark and Norway have a lot of free speech, and they actually have a bit more free speech than they desire, interestingly, in the case of Denmark and Sweden. And then you have the opposite, where Venezuela actually has a good amount of free speech, but way, way less than they desire. And then you have countries with very little free speech, like Pakistan and Egypt, who understandably have far less than they desire, like Turkey and Russia. Kenya is quite notable in that it doesn't have much free speech, and they feel they have much more than they desire. It's kind of an interesting survey that you can see that we just tweeted out from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, where we tweet all of the headlines like this one. Uber and Lyft fares surge as pandemic recedes, but drivers don't get a piece of the pie. Oh, really? Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe it's because they're about to be fully replaced by autonomous vehicles, but let's go ahead and read it anyways. Recent changes have driven down the pay for drivers. Recent changes like this huge Cambrian explosion of autonomous vehicles? No. Recent changes have driven down pay for drivers, including reduction of minimum pay for long-distance trips. Socializing and party, we're making less than normal, says Robert Eaton of Reno, Nevada, a full-time Uber driver. Over the last 2 years, he tries to work as many hours as possible. And then he says, while fares have skyrocketed in this market, the driver's pay has not been raised at all. And, well, Robert, I feel sorry for you, but let me explain what's happening. Dear Robert, here's what happened. The cars are about to become self-driving, and you're going to be replaced. And your piece of the fare, yes, the fares are going up. Here's why they're going up, is because Uber and Lyft now have a duopoly. Because they, for many years, were taking a lot of money from investors and using that money to make the price of the rides artificially cheap, subsidized, as we say in the biz. And people got addicted to using Uber and Lyft. And no one could compete with them because they couldn't raise millions and millions and billions of dollars to subsidize the fares. And now that no one else can compete with them, they're locked in as the entrenched incumbents. They captured the market, and now together they've looked left and right. The coast is clear. No one's going to come competing, and now they're going to raise the prices, and they're going to stop subsidizing the prices. They're going to stop losing money by investing in lowering the fares, and now they're going to start making a profit. And you're not going to get that profit. They are, because they spent all that money lowering the rides. And in fact, your fares are going to go down, your cut, Robert, while their cut goes up. They're going to become profitable. Your salary is going to go down because you're soon to be entirely replaced with autonomous vehicles. And that's what's going on. And to the confusion of tech journalists everywhere, by the way, who couldn't figure out, why were these companies so unprofitable for so long? Uber is unprofitable. Amazon, my God, is still unprofitable. Don't they know anything? These business amateurs, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, don't you know anything about business? The tech journalists wonder. How is it that you're not able to make a profit, Jeff Bezos? We're so confused, say the tech journalists who never took a business class. Business 101. Take a look at it.
Hey, interesting thing I just posted there. I also DM'd it, but I posted it. The Tech News thing. It's from Carl Bergstrom, posting a paper today in PNAS, which he says is the most important of his career. And I guess the best way to summarize it is to say that most of the stuff we talk about on tech news around the world is about all these communication systems designed to sell ads, basically, right, one way or another. And he said that's a threat to civilization, similar to climate change and things like that. That humans grew up, evolved to speaking one-on-one, and now all of a sudden everyone can talk to everyone with high levels of communication instantly. And there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And this is very, very dangerous. It's summarized in a whole bunch of areas. So
That's a great point.
How far does it go? Oh my God. Yep. 19, 20, it's long, but you get the gist of it by just reading the first few. I haven't read the article yet, but very interesting and very relevant to about everything we talk about here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Thank you for that share. And Carl, you just shared a good one. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just I've shared about 2 or 3. You're talking about the Clubhouse one. Yeah, this is just a report from a number of users that who were using Clubhouse at the end of last week, and apparently for a short period of time while they were using the app, a UI element popped up on the screen called Back Channel, which points to the fact that Clubhouse is testing backroom chat for DMs to people. There's nothing in here, unfortunately, that specifies that. The biggest question is going to be, if this is genuine and Clubhouse is doing this, is it going to be a one-on-one chatting feature so you can ping out to members of your club, or you can ping directly to other users or create groups, or is this for actual room chat, much the like that we've seen in Facebook and in Spotify's Green Room? So it wasn't up for long, but a number of users reported seeing it, and then it sort of disappeared.
They had a massive room on it last week as well. Some
I
people
missed that
on Clubhouse.
completely.
Yeah.
Did they come to any conclusion on it? Because there's
No,
so little
no,
information about
no.
this.
It's all speculation. I mean, it's all like how they're going to do it. But from my actual listening to the town halls, I think I don't know what it's 3 or 4 weeks ago, at least a few, maybe a month ago. I don't know, but it's Paul had indicated that he was really looking into it. So they're going to have it sometime. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's worth saying that the users who had this inside their app were able to sort of activate it and click on it, but the screen that it led to was just a blank screen that did nothing. So all we've got at the moment, unfortunately, is the fact that UI element to open up the back channel fragment was there, but beyond that, yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, indeed. It will add a whole new dynamic, especially if the e-commerce part comes in, because then if the links happen in the text chat as well, it gets very interesting indeed. Speaking of that, I did build a Tech News Around the World store, which has all kinds of products and t-shirts and coffee mugs and tumblers and even an incredibly cool looking clock with our circular logo. Anyway, I'll have that ready in the next meeting when we meet in about 5 hours. In the meantime, Shopify's Unite event, I just tweeted the link to it. It's unite.shopify.com. It's a beautiful website, and they have a countdown clock of 7 days and 8 hours and 21 minutes and 45 seconds. And there's a cute little button to check out for the price of $0 to register for the event. We will do a live stream of this event. So you can buy your own island, and yeah, it's going to be fun. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, I'm just sorry. I just wanted to check. The comment about the Tech News Around the World shop, is that being facetious or are you being genuine?
Oh, for real, yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
That's quite cool. That's the first I've heard of it. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Can I put in a personal request for a T-shirt that has Dave's silhouette on there, yelling "Soliloquy alert! Soliloquy alert!" So I would buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, that leads to the other article. Louis Vuitton owner LVMH believes the future of retail will be stores, and which is true for them because they're incredibly premium. In fact, the most premium products on the planet that understandably need stores, unlike the socks you buy at Target, which don't really need an actual store to test out. It's just flip-flops and socks, folks, or your Hanes underwear that you've bought 1,000 times before. But for sure, a Gucci handbag that costs, $10,000, yeah, you might actually want to feel that with your hand first before you click the buy button on the website. So yes, for LVMH, the future of retail will certainly be stores. But indeed, they are adding e-commerce, as my buddy Ian, who's the chief digital officer of LVMH, often says when he's here at my house on Christmas and New Year's with his girlfriend and their child. And I stayed with my mom in his house in Paris when we had the advantage of doing that before COVID kicked off. And thank you to Ian for that. But he's now resigned as the chief digital officer of LVMH and is now running Ledger, the new cold hard wallet for crypto, which is getting a lot of buzz and attention lately. But I'm going to save him to bring him in as part of a special event I'll be doing down the road with my big Swedish events when those kick off again. But yeah, LVMH owner correctly stating that their future is mostly stores. Yeah, very interesting indeed. And then this is an interesting one. Internal Amazon documents shed light on how company pressures out 6% of office workers each year. And the interesting thing is that the press is now getting wind of this, and it's from the Seattle Times. And that's not a coincidence because Amazon is headquartered in Seattle, where they employ hundreds of thousands of people in that city alone. And indeed, Amazon does have a sort of policy of cutting out the weakest folks every year. That's part of the company culture, and they all know it. And now a tech journalist in Seattle has got wind of this and is now publishing it a decade later. And the headline is Internal Amazon Documents Shed Light on How Company Pressures Out 6% of Its Workforce. And I dare suggest that the Catherine who wrote this article has many friends who work at Amazon and may even have relatives who work at Amazon who have told her this many times over the many years. But there it is. Now it's public information, and I honestly think it's actually kind of brilliant. I don't know why more companies don't do it. Anyway,
I mean, that's GE and Jack Welch. This is Robert. GE and Jack Welch.
Yep.
Just, take out the bottom 10%.
Yep. Mac Rumors reporting that Apple faces antitrust probe in Germany, which we covered. And thank you to everyone who sent that in. And Cheryl sent in a really interesting one just now, about the car hire startup called Virtuo adds Teslas to their fleet of rentable cars, essentially. The company which allows people to hire and unlock premium cars through an app. Which is, again, speaks to the kind of future of mobility, which is a huge topic that we cover at my conferences because it's such a booming space in itself. And I want to pause there because we could go on and on and on and on. And I want to save some of these best headlines for when we meet again in about 5 hours and 20 minutes. So hopefully you can hang tight and join us again then, or here tomorrow at the same bat time, same bat channel. And a huge thank you to everybody for jumping in with your headlines and comments and insights and doing this fun, creative co-creation process we do called Tech News Around the World. It's been a lot of fun, as always.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
It's May. Just a quick question.